And so, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and germs. Okay, no drums. Anyway, okay, no germ response. Okay, thank you.
No.
You know that if you say it, we're going to do it.
I love a good rimming. A good rim shot.
Now it's on the recording. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adam.
My job is done.
Your job is done.
Hey, let's bring it as Amy cereal.
You were talking about orgies first, but I guess that wasn't being recorded.
It wasn't being recorded. So now, though, everybody knows I was talking about orgies first. Okay. You're fine.
First orgy is done?
First orgy's done.
Okay.
Next orgy at the next break. Okay? All right. So this is Michael Smith of the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel. And he's here to talk about sigils. And I am indebted to him for coming all the way down from the shores of Nova Scotia.
I wish it was that cool.
From the shores of Nova Scotia and all the way down here to the southern reaches of South America. With totally different weather systems. Where he's at, he had to clear off his windshield, all the dead insects.
Well, maybe not the insects.
Yeah, all the squirrels, the dead squirrels. And so we really are, it's an honor for us to have him. And I'd like to welcome Michael. My dear friend and fellow tap dancer for the gods. Go correct.
Okay, so we'll just jump right into this. So we're going to be talking about signs and sigils, symbols, all these kinds of things. We're going to talk about what they are, how you can create them, what are some of the functions that they have, you know, why we would bother. Why would we bother to learn about all of these things? So one thing I will say right up front is that I am not I'm not a Q&A person at the end kind of person. So if you have a question or you have a comment, you need to raise your hand or say it then versus waiting to the end. Because by the time we get to the end of the class, we will have forgotten what we had talked about. So what your question was about, all that kind of stuff. So just right off the bat, we are surrounded, absolutely positively surrounded by signs and symbols. They are everywhere. Right. We are conditioned by them in the culture that we live in. I mean, things that are simple, like stop signs. And why does yellow mean yield and green mean go? You know, we can see an emblem. I always like the traffic ones because one of the things that was fun when we went to Spain was they used the European Union's symbols, traffic symbols. The same thing was true when we were in Ireland. And some of them are absolutely hilarious. From our perspective, when we look at those symbols, we're like, one of them, unless you knew that, had a little half circle, a line, had 4 lines coming out of it like this. So, and it was always there at the beginning of the tunnel. And what it meant was, you know, jellyfishes ahead. It looked like this. So it looked like that. And that meant jellyfishes ahead.
Right.
And then when you got up, this. Do you know where your jellyfish is? Now, because of the context, it was very simple to say that when you saw this, it meant turn your headlights on. And then when you came out of the tunnel, the question mark after it meant have you checked your headlights?
Right.
but we knew that because of the context. There's another great one, and I can't draw it and everything. It shows a car, and then it shows these two motorcycles, and they're kind of up on one wheel. And the helmet that the motorcycle riders look like ninja hoods, little black with a little band, and then there's these little stars. And then what that meant was, beware of, ninjas on motorcycles because, attacking.
Mm-hmm.
What it really was it was a reminder not to follow, for motorcyclists, not to follow too close. But again, if you just, because of the way we're conditioned with signs and symbols that we see around us, it's very easy to say, sure, I can see that this is, ninjas with attacking with shurikens, on the road, and beware.
Mm-hmm. That's a helpful thing to know.
It's a helpful thing to know that Spain is filled with ninjas on motorcycles. But we see them all the time. They all have meaning to us. We have been conditioned in such a way over our lifetimes that so many of them we recognize unconsciously, automatically. We don't think about it. And a lot of it has to do, and again, let's go back to the whole idea of, why does green mean go, and yellow means yield, caution, and red means stop. And in a lot of ways, and I won't get into the potential Kabbalistic ideas about why that is, but we'll ignore that one for this class. But in a lot of ways, what has happened is that we as a society, we as a culture, have agreed that that's what those things mean. They do not have that meaning intrinsically. There's nothing intrinsic to the color green that means go. So when we're thinking about sigils, when we're thinking about all, creating these things, we begin to understand that we're looking at what have we decided? What have we decided as a culture, as a society? What has been used in the past that indicates that this particular set, this particular diagram, this particular drawing, this particular image means X, means Y, means Z. One of the things on that very first page I passed out, some things that a sigil can be, but I want to jump down to the bottom. Yep, that's this one here. I'll start folding them up. At the very bottom, I have a couple of things talking about the basic elements and gestalt items that over the many millennia, over the many centuries, people have used these to represent certain energies, certain forces, certain concepts, broader concepts that can be reduced down to particular symbols. So we look at lines, and circles, and spirals, and dots, and we look at pluses, and even triangles and squares and stars and lightning bolts, and these particular set of images, they all have within them a particular meaning that over the centuries people have used them. So for example, whenever you see a triangle like this, or at least, and here goes back to magical conditioning, being conditioned in particular traditions, working with particular traditions, working with particular symbols. I see a triangle like this, point up with nothing else. First thing that always comes to mind is 5. No.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly right. That's the very first thing that comes to mind. So I saw your tattoo. The first thing that came to mind was fire. Now, that's an interesting point. That's my condition, to see that point up triangle and to relate that when I'm thinking about that in terms of fire. On the other hand, that may not have anything to do with why you have that particular tattoo of the triangle there, you know? Because in that particular instance, we're not talking about something that is, you know, I'm looking at it from, this is how I was trained, this is how generally society has used this, or magical societies have, and traditions have used that particular symbol, and therefore, that's my first reaction. You having it tattooed on your person means that it has some meaning for you that I'm probably be completely unaware of. And therefore, for me to project that particular definition onto that particular tattoo means that in all likelihood, I'm wrong. And I bring this up for a very important reason. Later on, I mean, we're going to talk about some of these. Like when you look at this particular one, the planetary seals, those particular symbols, you probably looked in books, in ancient tomes, and you have seen the sigils or the signatures of the, you know, the aethers or of the planetary intelligences or any number of demons and all that kind of stuff. And you look at those things and you say, what does that mean? Where does that come from? How can I deconstruct that? And in all likelihood, the answer is you can't. You're just not going to be able to. That when you can, and we're going to talk about a little bit of this in bind rooms, when we talk about creating symbols out of bind rooms, where you see a bind room, which is a collection of runes that have been put in a particular place, or in a particular order, in a particular pattern, and then somebody coming along and saying, oh, let me take that apart and see what the elements that make that up is. They're like, no. The thing about runes is there's lots of straight lines. Lots of straight lines, there's lots of angled lines. So it's difficult to turn these things. I have up here, you know, the seal of Saturn and the seal of Venus. Yes, those are related to the magic squares. We're going to talk about the Kamea or the magic squares and how to make sigils out of them and everything. But trying to figure out what this is supposed to indicate, you can't deconstruct it that way. Now, a sigil, again, is a figure. It can be a seal, a sign, a glyph, all of those kinds of things. But what it's trying to do is it's trying to contain the essence, information, and energy of a particular pattern, particular being, particular energy, particular process, particular composition or composite of those things put together.
So that phrase you said, the essence, information, and energy, that's an important concept for folks to really get. Right. So right there at the top of the page or in your notes.
The essence of something is, what is it intrinsically? I mean, what is the substance of its beingness? You know, we all have a particular essence to us. And you could say that, you know, the soul or the spirit within us, I mean, a lot of different paths use different ways of describing that. But there is something that is the intrinsic part of who you are. The information, of course, is the what are we about? What's this thing about? What's its definition? If you're talking about us, it's kind of like, so what have I done? What's my life been like? What are my actions? What have I, you know, what have I learned? What have I taught? Where have I been? How, you know, where did I start? Where am I going to end up? Then you, of course, you have the energy. And the energy is the power, the pattern of say, my life force that moves through the world, that interacts with the other life forces that I come in contact with. And so all things from one perspective. And I will say this up front. We have a particular, the assembly has a particular perspective about how the world, we have a worldview.
Yes.
This is how the world
You have a
works.
cosmological view that is consistent.
That is consistent within itself. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way of how the world works, of defining the way the world works. It doesn't mean that it's the only, that it is the absolute correct way, the truth with a capital T versus the truth with a small t. But it works, and it's consistent, and it is a way of describing things that we experience within the world. All traditions, I mean, certainly Reflections has, all traditions have a worldview. How do you think the cosmos operates? And because we're human beings, and because we've been stuffed into these containers, you know, it's always incomplete. This is one of the ways that we, you know, think about how you can divide or how you can carve up things, how you can describe them, how you can understand what they are intrinsically, what they're about, and what pattern they have within the world.
And so within that worldview, the essence, information, and energy is consistently used to ascribe qualities or essences to be able to explain things. So that phrase is very often used to say, well, we need to understand this, the essence, the information, the energy. In this situation, we get in contact with the energy of it. Here, we need to really focus on the essence. And so,
Right.
And that's a consistent part of the work that you'll see from the assembly. And I just wanted to make that clear, that that was an important concept. And for you, you're so used to talking about it, you just skip right on through it. You know, I wanted you guys to get it.
Those three things.
So I just wanted you to be cognizant that was a very important way of looking at things. To understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're absolutely correct. You know, one does work, but everybody knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to think about a sigil is it's a highly compressed language. It's a way of taking very broad concepts, very broad energies, or the totality of some being, because like I talked earlier, you know, you'll find in dusty old tomes things like the signature or the sigil of the intelligence, the being that is the intelligence of Saturn or the intelligence of Mars. So what you're trying to do, the sigil is doing, is taking that broad concept, that broad idea of the being or the energy or whatever force is being, and then compressing it down into something that can fit inside the human mind. We have a very limited attention span. We really can only hold so much in our brain at any given moment. This is why later on when we talk about the creation of sigils, that especially sigils that you're going to visualize, that they can't be overly complex, because most people think about how complex a line drawing or something that you can have, that you can hold in your brain with your eyes closed without looking at it again and again and again. Most people, that can't be too terribly complex. Then, if you're going along the lines of, I know that for assembly covens, all assembly covens create a sigil. And it's part of the pattern. They create a sigil that is an indication or a holder of the pattern, you know, a representation of the pattern that the coven. So, I know that when I was the high priest of Roman Star, you know, we would go through this guided meditation where we were opening up the inner temple to the coven's inner temple. And it involved the sigil. So I'm leading people through. Now, That meant the sigil had to be in such a shape and such a design that I could actually describe it in words. You know, people saw it. And the members of the coven could visualize it easily enough once they got used to it. But we would go through this pattern of building, which meant that you had to be able to describe it all. Now, some of them, like I got down here in the bind rooms, this was one that I used years ago that looks like a little rocket. It's that one there. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Describing that was not something you not something I ever did.
Well, it looks like a dragonfly.
I always thought it looked like a rocket. Looks like a rocket to me. But then I'm more of a sci-fi person.
Dragonfly rocket.
A dragonfly. When dragonflies take over the universe.
You overlord.
But I never had to describe this one because it was at the time I had created this as a personal sigil. Something that I was using for myself as a representation of myself, and I had built it from runes, the runes of my name, or one of my magical names. So you can think about too. So we're trying to take the sigil is there to help you fit a very broad concepts, a very complicated concepts, composites, beings, and everything into something that the human mind can hold on to and can be part of its attention, within its attention span. The other thing, too, to think about is that when you create a sigil, you're creating something that is a little bit outside of normal linear time. Okay, and what I mean by that is that you have encapsulated in a static moment something that is usually ebbing, flowing, changing. When we're talking about forces, forces are always moving. We're talking about beings. Beings have an existence outside of the sigil, outside of our and therefore they're moving and changing. So the sigil is looking to hold that moment of energy, that moment of pattern, and expand it now. How do I hold on to this, even though it's a force, and that force is moving? Now, I'm probably going to use this. I mean, I use this all the time in ritual, where I create sigils to draw that force and then move that force through the ritual, to add it to the ritual energy, to add it to what tools that I am creating, things of that nature. But still, I'm taking that moment in time and I'm expanding it outward with that sigil so that I'm holding on to more of that in that moment than would normally be, as part of just the normal turning over of time. Now, one thing I always think about, and I love this, sigil is a carefully tuned spiritual antenna. When you create a sigil, you take these elements, you take the various patterns that we use, whether you're using the runes or whether you're using the magic squares, and we're going to talk a little bit about, I didn't bring them, but like I have Boris Zolkov's and I've got Thorne's books on sigils.
Sorry, you said sigils?
Sigils. That one.
So I've heard sigils and sigils.
I usually say sigils, but by the same token, I've heard Athme and Thame and Thame, which is always my favorite. Let's argue about this. I say sigils, but that's, I'm from the South. I'm sure that many Yankees say. This is about DC being at the Mason-Dixon line. Yeah. Calling me a Yankee?
That's Maryland, Pennsylvania. That's what I like.
Yeah,
Southern.
Oh, okay. But I love it.
I think both pronunciations are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And you're going to hear both pronunciations. I just happen to use Sigils. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, what Michael's talking about, using them in ritual, we, in the order, we have sigils for each of the elements and sigils for the order as a whole. And yeah, so the concept of being outside of time, being within the, outside of the temporal, but within the eternal, so that we're in the expanded now, and that's where that happens. That is pretty much part of both our traditions.
Right.
And so that's really good.
One of the things, and this is adding something to it, when I talk about being a carefully tuned spiritual antenna. An antenna works that current is run up through that antenna at a particular frequency. And so you might think of it as it causes the antenna to vibrate at a particular frequency. And then, that's a very simplified way about it. I know, you're engineering.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. I'm going to be quiet though. Go ahead.
But when you tune that to a particular frequency, when you tune the radio to a particular frequency, the antenna then is the thing that is drawing that frequency out of the ether, out of the air, out of the electromagnetic spectrum in that very narrow range, so that the radio, some of you are too young to remember radios, but then, you know, the radio station plays through the speakers and everything. But the antenna has to be tuned to that particular frequency. When you're building a sigil, you are also you're creating an antenna that is tuned to a particular frequency, that is tuned to a particular energy or to a particular being or to a particular process. And in doing so, when you enliven that, because when the radio is turned off, nothing is going on. There's no energy there to cause the antenna to do anything. But you put some energy into it, you turn it on, some energy into it, then it begins that attractive part that draws that particular frequency of energy, that draws that particular being to it. And therefore, you know, that's one of the things that sigils are used a lot in ritual. Is this idea of, I need more, you know, need more of energy X, I need more fire, or I need more of the divine goddess, or however you want to, whatever energy it is that you're working for. I need more different, you know, energy within my ritual. Now I, as an individual, as a person, you know, can tune myself to that particular frequency. I can draw that energy out of the ether. I can do that particular work. On the other hand, that's me spending a lot of time and energy doing that myself. Then sigils become a tool for helping me to draw that. So I don't expend nearly as much of my own energy and attention doing that thing of just drawing the energy in, and I can spend more of my time actually forming it in the direction that I need for it to go. So in that way, you enliven the sigils, you know, you put your energy into them, you get them going, then they help draw that energy in. And just like any other tool, they, in that sense, they are like any other tool. Yes, over time, I could probably push a nail into this wall with my thumb, but it would be so much easier for me to use a hammer. So much faster and so much easier for me to use a hammer.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to come down and mop your brow every evening.
That's right.
Feed you water.
Well, and that's what tools are for. Right? You know, they are extensions of ourselves to make certain things easier. And so sigils, that way, are a way of drawing and attracting particular energies that it's easier. And again, once energized, once going, will do their thing. That's where the whole idea, you know, amulets, talismans, you've probably seen online, you know, you can buy these discs, you know, the amulets or the talisman of, you know, with the seal of Mars on it, and, you know, all the different things. Very solemn, very ceremonial in its nature. But then you can do something as simple as, help doing job hunting and stuff like that, and using just a single room. Take it out. I usually take it out of my room set. Give it, it's the Fehu room, which is about wealth and well, it means cattle, but it's about wealth and about that kind of physical, material success and everything. So you take that out, you energize it if necessary, you give it to them, they put it in their pocket, they go to job interviews. You push that into their energy and everything and set it up so that when they're in their job interviews, it's the energy it's the sigil, it's the sign that attracts that. And therefore now the person that they're interviewing with or whatever job hunting they're doing, now they're in the field of, that energy field of, I am attracting this to me. Surrender that job, or surrender Dorothy, or whatever.
Surrender your cattle.
Surrender your cattle. To them.
Yeah, and so we used some of that exactly in the candle magic that we did.
Mm-hmm.
With many of the sigils that were there. Many of them were combinations of things. Like another one, you had both the I Ching hexagrams and runes and other things. And so what he said is exactly what we did during the candle magic class.
And so it's important. One of the important things about it is that, there's a lot of ways that you can put these things together. We'll talk about the magic squares and everything, because that's one good way. I actually gave you the astrological glyphs because if you ever take an intensive astrology class with Evo, what he's going to do to you, what he's going to help you. That's the right way.
That was the correct statement. That was the correct statement.
Is you're going to spend time taking these Gestalt and other Gestalt symbols, and you're going to deconstruct these glyphs, because these glyphs are not just pretty pictures for the signs and for the planets, but they actually have a meaning that is associated to the energy of those. And therefore that particular glyph, astrological glyph, can also be used as part of the creation of Sigils. So, and then you get into something, some of those are more traditional. We'll call those traditional, the magic squares and runes, bind runes and astrological glyphs and stuff like that. But then you get into something that I would refer to as a little bit more modern. And you're talking about Laura Zarkov, you talk about Thorne's books, and talk about some of these. But they also talk about, when we think about, again, we're exposed to so many symbols. Those symbols have a particular meaning, a particular energy to them. So you can use even these more modern ideas. Let me see Thorne's book real quick. Thank you. Yeah. She used a lot of rooms too. I've forgotten that. There we go. The dagger. Oh, I didn't even bother. Yeah, I forgot about that. Well, no, I didn't forget about it. I'm not a big Hebrew letter person. I've studied them, but they don't say anything to me in particular.
Not a big what fan, sorry?
Hebrew letters. A lot of people, on the
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
ceremonial magic side and everything, they spend a lot of time, they study the Hebrew letters, and then, of course, there are a set of symbols, kind of like, it's funny. So when you think about English, when you think about our alphabet, 26 letters, they have their roots in more ancient writing systems and stuff like that. But in some ways, we've sort of separated those letters from their roots. And so, and because we're exposed to them all the time, N's and A's and E's don't have a particular meaning to us. But then some languages or some alphabets, Hebrew letters being one of them, runes being another one, there's very much a focus on what does this letter or what does this symbol mean. So I said Fehu. Fehu means cattle. Okay, it's the one that is the line. It has the two lines that go up like this. So, and then all of the Hebrew letters still have their traditional meanings. The fish hook, the ox goad, all that kind of stuff. But English kind of lost all of that. We don't generally think of those letters as having any meaning beyond just their alphabetic.
Well, beyond vowels and consonants, we don't have anything else.
So it's got, there's the symbolic meaning,
Right.
the symbology of it, and then there's also the interpreted meaning.
Well, and it's kind of like ancient Egyptian. It was both an alphabetic language and a symbolic language. So they had meaning in and of themselves. The hieroglyph had a meaning, and you could use that hieroglyph to mean the word. But they also had a phonetic value. So you could also spell out words with the hieroglyphs. So they used both.
Whereas some of the Japanese and Chinese and Syrian and not Syrian, Sumerian. And the oldest language, Sanskrit, oldest written language. And of course the runes, they still, those images have meaning in addition to spelling them out.
Just their phonetics.
Yeah.
But for English, they tend to just be, which is, now, there are people, and I know there are people that do this, and they work effectively doing it this way. Actually, last year, I went to a Sigils class where he was talking about trying to recapture the idea of using the English alphabet as a magical language to create sigils. To take a word, spell a word out, and then to take those letters and arrange them in a pattern that then was looking to encompass the energy of that particular word. Now, it is exactly the same thing as taking the runes and spelling out a word and then putting that word, it's just that because English is our secular language, or is our secular alphabet, think of it that way, because the English characters, our alphabet, is a secular alphabet. We don't tend to think of it as having any magical meaning. But it could.
Like I said, that's apart from vowels and consonants.
Right.
Yeah, there is a meaning behind the difference between vowels and consonants. There's a magical thing there, but other than that, there's not a lot. And so sometimes people take the English letters and find their equivalents to get magical,
right,
to get symbolism from it. Yeah.
Well, a lot of times, this is, it's a big thing within ceremonial magic.
Yeah.
Of actually translating you got to translate the English word into Hebrew.
Yeah.
And then from the Hebrew, you find its numbers, and there's a whole pattern of figuring out what the energy of a particular word is.
And what words have similar energies,
right,
or the same energy.
Have the same energy because they have the same number. Because in Hebrew, the letters are also numbers. They're a numbering system. Yes.
It's funny. So this is all super interesting. The limited way that I've communicated personal sigils in the past has been using English letters.
word, the method that I learned was take a word, or better yet, a declarative statement that starts with "I will," drop out those first two words, drop out all of the letters, make something into a signal out of those letters. But what I had to do to make it really work for me was then arrange them in a way where the shapes into which they were combined. First of all, it didn't feel like I was reading an English word anymore. The letters were all there, and there was enough recognition of them that it would kind of evoke the words, but it was also arranged in a way that suggested pictures, or suggested a certain kind of energy that I could focus on, precisely because the letters by themselves didn't evoke much.
Right. And one of the things that's important, and I know that usually, especially if I'm making bind runes, if I'm taking the runes and I'm creating a bind rune. So, and I have usually when I'm using proper names, like creating sigils for individuals to use for themselves, a personal sigil. But when I'm looking at the energy, let's say I'm creating a protective bind rune, or I'm looking for a transformative bind rune, or a bind rune to attract success for something, or a bind rune to get rid of something. Usually what I do is, now I'm going through those runes and I'm looking at what they mean and what their energy is. What energy is being drawn by that particular rune. So Fehu is drawing wealth. Thursaz is, active defensive, i.e. not waiting for something to come to you, but going out and stabbing it before it gets there. So there's a variety but then you've got Awaz, which is more of that whole business of I'm the passive, I am the picket, I'm the passive defense, that, something has to come against. So I look at that energy and then, okay, so here's the runes I'm going to use. And I put them together. Well, that doesn't look right. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't speak to me in any kind of way. I'm not going to, this won't be useful. It doesn't attract, not only does it have to attract the energy outside of itself, but it has to attract the operator as well. You're the operator in that sense. Unless it attracts you, unless it can engage you, then it won't work. Okay? Now, that pattern might work for somebody else. Then you get into, and this is really, talk a little bit about this. It's kind of like where take a rune, and now, okay, so I'm going to add the energy of this other rune, but instead of just drawing one, I'm going to draw two. And then I'm going to lay another rune on top of that, which on both sides, and I'm going to mirror them. And, you can get really, really fancy. You start manipulating those things. It's kind of like, okay, now here is a sigil that I have created. Really hadn't thought about this as being an art class.
I have some there.
Should.
It does look familiar.
It does look familiar. Use that as an ancestor gate. That's Samhain.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, I painted this on the back of a mirror.
Yes.
We use it Samhain. So you've got Othala, and you got Lagus, and then you got Rados on top of it. So Othala is about your ancestry and everything, but Lagus is the flow of energy, the flow of motion through things, and then Rado is the traveler. It's the thing that actually causes things to move. And so we use this bind rune on the back of an ancestor gate to not only open to the ancestors, but to provide them the path and the mechanism through which they can flow into the ritual. So, yeah. But it's not simply a matter of, well, I've got 3 different runes here, and I didn't just stack them up on top, stack them up on top of each other and say, oh, well, that's a single that would work. Sure.
But you had to make it inviting and something that is
right.
That has a pleasant shape so that you can remember it.
Well, part of that is the being able to visualize and remember it. Can you hold this in your brain?
Now you can do that with letters. I mean, this is not against that. I mean, I use letters for the sigils that I make, and using that method that you said, Harper. But one of the things that also is, and I'm hoping to get some insights on, is using the magic squares. But there are sigils that you will use, sigils that you will use sometimes that you aren't the originator.
Correct.
And so the thing is to be very aware of the meanings and uses and purposes of those ones that you use that come already created to you. Because sometimes, sometimes like we did for the candles, you're going to rely on some of the ancient sigils that have already been done, like the hexagrams, you know.
Right.
Right. And so having some understanding of them is good. But sometimes you're relying on them. Like, do you really have to be able to understand everything going on in the seal of Saturn in order to use it? It's still usable, and it still has meaning and depth, because as no matter what else, it's been in use for a very long time.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why you use sigils that somebody else made, that it comes already powered up. All you have to do is add your energy to it to get it to respond.
Because it resonates through all the operators that have worked with it over the however long it has been in existence. Now, what is important is that if you're going to use the seal of Saturn, you understand what Saturn is about and what you want Saturn to do for you.
Spank my enemy.
Well, I like Mars better.
Yeah, but Saturn spanks them. Mars just kills them.
Now, sometimes, I tell you what, I have used the seal of Saturn to close doors,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they're very good at sealing things up.
Yeah.
The seal of Saturn is, you know, and use this and everything. On the other hand, look at the astrological glyphs. This particular page, it's got the planets. Well, I don't know why I did that, because Saturn is right there. Oh, that's all right.
La, 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 la.
So then you've got the glyph of Saturn, and you've got the seal of Saturn. So when you look at those two things, they don't relate to each other at all.
No, because this is done with Magic Square, right?
Right. This is done on the magic square, but how to interpret that? That's the deconstruction part.
Right.
You know, you can spend a very long time trying to figure out what this seal of Saturn from the magic square or from Kamea, where it came from and what word or what it is. It's more like this is the energy of that square made manifest or put out as the whole thing. Astrologically, now, I've used that one to seal doors up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or gates that need to be closed and stuff like that. On the other hand, if I find something and I decide that I would really like that, but I need to go back and get my wallet, I put the astrological glyph of Saturn.
You shall not move.
That's right, to hold it down.
You shall not
You
move.
will not move.
That's right.
You know, actually, Evo tells a story of doing that to. He was doing it to a plane because he was sitting on the side. He was sitting on the side of the where they were loading the luggage, and his bag hadn't shown up yet.
And so you want the plane to move.
And so he didn't want anything to move until his bag, he could see his bag come off the cart onto that belt to go up in there. And so, because they had loaded what was already, they had already delivered, and so he dropped the astrological glyph on top of that little ramp, and it wouldn't move. And then, you know, like 5 minutes later, here comes the cart with his bag, and he let that go. So it was one of those, it's kind of like, now. So.
Well, I've put some, for certain people looking for a place to live, I've put some rooms on places.
What, to hold it until that person shows up?
Or, you know, to hold it together until they were able to get out.
Ah, yeah, well, there's that one. That was one of the things I was going to suggest to them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I was so angry, we ain't gonna talk about what I did.
Okay. But let's say that you did have an annoying neighbor in your apartment. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to paint one of these things or create a sigil, you know.
White chalk on white walls works really well.
Oh, I know. We're just tracing the necessary energy. Although I will say that something permanent that I mean, I have done this for people. Like, again, this is putting them on resumes, putting sigils on resumes to attract the attention of the hiring manager.
Mm-hmm.
So we've decided that we're doing this magical work to help somebody find a job or to find a new place. Or, you know, I'm filling out the forms electronically for, you know, my mortgage application or whatever it is. Kind of thing. So you have a sigil that you want to use, that you're going to add to. So then I created in a very large form on the computer, print it out. That goes on the altar. And then I save it out as a 1 point by 1 point graphic, which really just looks like the dot.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere on that form, I put that dot. That dot is the larger sigil that is now on the altar, shrunk down to
1 by 1.
1 by 1, which just looks like a period or a dot or a little misprint. Nobody knows, nobody recognizes what that is when you print it out or when they print it out, when they receive it in the mail, or if they receive it in their email. But that sigil is tied to one that's on my altar. They're going to see it. And then hopefully that energy, then from what I'm doing, the working I'm doing here, working that's happening there, is having the necessary impact.
That's better than what I used to do for presentations. That's when I would use white on white.
White on white.
White on white text.
Do you know the spell that, you heard this about the spell that Evo provided Jason for the Fool's Dog Tarot app?
No.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember which magic square they used, but it's just a bit of text code. And he had translated the characters into their ASCII for, I think it was the square of Jupiter, because they were looking to expand the business and for the program to sell and all this kind of stuff. So it's a little text block. And let's look at the magic squares real quick.
Magic square.
That's this one right here.
Well, that makes my eyes hurt.
Excellent. We've been successful.
So numbers. So there's at the lower right-hand side, there's Jupiter, and it's a 4 by 4 square. The number that is associated with it. So Saturn is 3 by 3, and Jupiter is 4 by 4, and Mars is 5 by 5. That's
I wonder where that comes from.
this. Saturn.
Bala.
Yep. Vina is 3, Hesed is 4, Gabora is 5. That's where that number comes from. And
Esoterica 1.
I didn't include the how to calculate these.
No, that's Esoterica 2.
Anyway, so he had taken these numbers. And there's a basic key over here for English.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
So there's a couple of the reduction keys. But what it basically amounts to is, you know, you take a word, and I'm trying to remember what word. I don't remember what word they were that they have. But they reduced that into these numbers. Then they took the square of Jupiter, and he created a little text block that just had the ASCII for the numbers, you know, and then a little mark over the places where the letters were. So all it looks like is a string of numbers that occasionally the numbers have a little bracket around them. And Jason added that like a comment code,
Mm-hmm.
comment block
Mm-hmm.
at the front of his application.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of every copy
Yeah.
of the app that
Mhm.
they ever sell. To expand the business and to expand, the success of what they were selling.
That is great. That is actually really great.
I think I missed his staff.
Me too.
Okay,
So whatever is the word,
let's do this.
Let's do one.
Let's do an exercise. Now, let's talk specifically about magic squares. These are tradition. If you notice, if you start looking at these, what you see is that a magic square basically amounts to the row and the column of each one of these totals up to the same thing. For Saturn, then, 9 plus 4 plus 2 is 15. 5 plus 3 plus 7 is 15. 8 plus 1 plus 6 is 15. Then you go down the columns. 4 plus 3 plus 8 is 15. 9 plus 5 plus 1 is 15. 2 plus 7 plus 6, 15.
and then 4 plus 5 plus 6.
So,
Down the diagonal.
so all of these, so that's what a magic square is. There are a number of solutions for any square that you create. These are what are referred to as traditional, these particular patterns. I mean, if you turned this, the square of Saturn 90 degrees, and you made the top row 8, 3, 4, it would still total upright, but it's not the magic square of Saturn. These are the traditional ones. And I use
Did
these.
you understand that, what he's saying? Yeah, okay.
And is 15 associated with Saturn in some way? Is it important that it's 15?
It's important that it's a 3 by 3.
Yeah, 3 by 3 is important. 1 through 9, so a 3 by 3, you're going to add, it's going to
Have
be 1 through
9
9.
digits.
It's going to have 9 digits. I did not include the math for how to calculate this.
Is that true for all the squares if you add these?
Yes.
Same as-
Right. It's going to be every row total and every column total to the same number. Yep.
Okay.
So,
So then, when you take your word,
so then we get a word. Let's use a word. Okay, so the first thing you would do, let's say you're going to use the magic square to make a square.
Wait, first you got to pick which square.
Got to pick which square. So then that means you have to have some understanding of what the energy of each one of these squares represents. Or I should say, the energy of each one of these planets represents. Or the energy of which one of these spheres, what they represent.
and that's when we go to this one.
That's when you run over here to the planets. And this is not a complete, a complete list of all the possible things that are about. This is more from an astrological perspective. But the sun and moon, I usually think about it in these ways. It's kind of like the sun and the moon, they're the vital source of energy. But the sun represents the center or the source of these things, the core of one's being, whereas the moon is the more reactive, unconscious self. The moon is associated with Yusad. Yusad is that last step before manifestation, that last place in which, the last test. Will this work? Can this come into being and be effective or be valid within the world? That's the last place. It's the source of a lot of our magic. A lot of our magic starts there. You rise the astral, you build that which you want. That's what trickles down into manifestation. So, but Jupiter is about expansion, about the growing of things, about the spreading of things. Saturn is about limitations. It's about limits and boundaries. You notice that there's not a Camilla on here for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And there's not one on here for Earth. They have them.
But the core word is elder planets.
Right. The 7 elder planets. I mean, I don't know where to put this. I don't share those. I don't teach those.
Well, the thing is that in the ancient world, they hadn't yet
didn't
discovered
them.
the ones
And some of
past
Saturn.
Jupiter. Saturn? Yes.
Saturn.
They didn't have any idea about the planets past Saturn, so that's that. And since the moon was such a large figure in our sky, the moon was included as one of the elder planets. And
Same
so
thing.
when you talk about the 7 elder planets, then a lot of the things associated with that then has been around for many millennia.
Right.
And so that's why you'll have, so anything that's associated with the planets past Saturn, then it's considered kind of new.
It's modern.
It's modern. It's like that new stuff, that stuff we can't trust yet. So.
Well, and that's true. I mean, one of the things that happens is
Yeah.
I mean, and this is not really an astrology class, but, as astrologers found, as astronomers found Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, and astrologers took that and they said, okay, let's look at this. Let's re-examine charts and predictive stuff and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, so how do these new planets fit within that particular thing? And can I explain this at a greater detail or better if I say, well, Pluto is about this? They also look at what happened around those times when these things were discovered.
When Pluto was square with the sun or whatever, it's like
Yeah.
what in history happened.
What happened then?
Yeah.
So now, 7 elder planets. So, so just basically, Saturn is going to be about limitations. It's going to be about setting boundaries. It's going to be about containing. Mars is not always about war, but it is about vital force and action and activity and doing. Venus is about what is important, what is valuable, what is necessary. It's also about beauty in the sense that
Elegance.
right. It also has the more of the Hod. Let's look at Mercury. Mercury and Hod and everything. Mercury, of course, is about mind. It's about thought. It's about examination. It's about classification. Venus, on the other hand, kind of is an opposite, or on the other side, is more about the emotional, the ecstatic, the brilliance that comes from being in touch with the world. The sun, again, is about energy. It is the source of power. The moon is about the consciousness, the conscious mind, and the revealed. The moon then is about the unconscious. It's about the emotional. It's about the things that are deep and hidden. Jupiter, as opposite to Saturn, then is about those things that are expansive and growing. And so for example, if I were looking, let's see, what's a good example? I had a good example.
You had one right here. You had Mars.
Well, that was Mars, English plotted directly onto the square of Mars. Mars is the one that is close enough. It's 25. It's 25 squares
Mm-hmm.
or 25 blocks in Mars. We have 26 letters in the alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the closest one to actually mapping English directly onto that. But, for example, if you look on the back of that, if you look at this, so I use the word vision. So this was sigils that were created to expand my vision. Okay, my ability to see farther into the future about the possibilities and probabilities. Okay, now one of them, vision plotted onto Saturn, means that I'm interested in those things that are of a material nature, those things that are manifestable, those things that have a practical side to them. On the other hand, visions put on the moon is, now I'm looking at the spiritual, the emotional, the more ecstatic, or not ecstatic, but the more I'm not interested so much in what is going to happen in the world, but what's going to happen within my spiritual, emotional life. So vision mapped onto these two energies is going to be very different in what it is that you're going to get.
Right. This is a very good example. Thank you.
So, and the same thing would be if I had mapped this onto, say, Mars, then now I need a vision of what needs to be done, what to do. So, now, let's run over here, turn that page over to the basic key of English. Now, here's the thing. We can assign the numbers, two-digit numbers, to all of the alphabet, with A being 1 and Z being 26. Now, that would map directly pretty close onto Mars, directly. The problem with using that, 1 through 26, is that you're now down in the nitty-gritty, okay, of manifestation. You've gotten down into all of the details. You've allowed no space for divine intervention. You've allowed no space for the ebb and flow of the way the universe moves and changes. So you've actually come down here and you're trying to do things on the metal. But you can take these 1 through 26, and you can take the two-digit number, and then you can add them together to create a number 1 to 9. 1 to 9, 1 to 9, and then 1 to 8. If you use that number, now you're up here at the level of your side. Now you're up here at the level where most magic takes place, where we create what it is that we desire, it trickles down, and it becomes manifest. But in that process, there is room for the adjustment of the higher self. There's room for the adjustment of, say, the divine. There's room for all of those things that need to ebb and flow because we, being finite, cannot see all the possibilities. So the other side of it, too, is it's easier to do. It's easier to actually get it to work. Because when you're down here you're down here on the metal, you've bound yourself by the manifest in a way that now you're struggling to get the energy to move. The energy doesn't want to, it's fixed, you know. This energy, all of these atoms doing their thing and all of those electrons rolling around and all of that kind of stuff and everything, you know, they'd like to fly apart. They'd like to do whatever they want. There's a ton of energy in this if you could let it go at the same time, but we've bound it up. And so that means that I can't. Even though we're mostly empty, all of these things are mostly empty space.
Intersecting.
Right. You know?
Yeah.
So that's why you reduce this 1 to 9. So that you're operating here in your sod versus down here in Malkut when you're doing your magic.
So you're working in the astral as opposed to
Right.
the earth plane.
Right.
But sorry, even if you're using a.
That was my next
square
question.
that has no-
Doesn't matter.
So if you're using a square of Mars that has double-digit numbers,
You
You
still-
can
you
do that if you want to.
You can reduce, so all of those double digits can be reduced to a single digit.
Not in this.
Okay.
Not here. You're reducing these numbers
For the letters.
For the letters.
For the
These
words you're
remain the
creating.
same.
Yeah.
This, and what this really indicates in a lot of ways, is that there's more to this energy than we can manipulate. Think about it that way. There's a lot more power in the moon than we could potentially manipulate. Again,
You get to access up to 9, but that beyond that is beyond our ability.
it's beyond us.
That's very
Now-
humbling. I like that.
If we were, if we were not manifest,
Then those would come available because our alphabets would be
would be very different.
Would be very different. You use it.
Which is why you gave the example of doing it on a 9 square and a,
On Saturn and on the moon.
yeah,
Right. Because the nice thing about that is this is a 3x3 square, and then this is a 9x9 square. This is the smallest. This is the largest.
largest. Yeah.
So, and because their energies is going to be quite different.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to note that we have more access to all of the pieces of Saturn than we do of the Moon.
That's interesting.
And
Yeah.
why is that? Because Saturn is about limits,
Oh, yeah.
form.
Yeah.
It's a now when we're talking about Binah, we're talking about form as the the ultimate concept of form.
Mm-hmm.
But down here on the bottom,
Okay,
It's
that
about
makes sense.
form.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's just like,
but that's
when
a
you're
little
down
more
at the,
esoteric.
that's
a
like,
little more
that's like if you're at the assembly level, you can write your own routines. But you're one level up and you're doing C or whatever, then you got to use the libraries that are available.
You use those libraries. But if you want to code on this is a programming thing. And if you want to write down on the metal, and this is one of the things that I do, in assembler, it's kind of like now you're moving bits around.
Yeah. You're down
But
there.
if you're up here at these higher levels, it's kind of like, I'm going to call these bits social security number, his name, and these kinds of things. Now I'm up here manipulating things with tags on them instead of down here pushing ones and zeros around.
Yeah, rotating and shifting and rotating and shifting. That's all you can do at the assembler level.
Right. At that level, you're just moving, but it takes a special kind of creature to do
To
that.
do that kind of stuff.
I see questions on eyes.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Yeah, I have a really question about vision on the moon square.
Right?
So vision 491965 from I to O 96. Why did you not go straight from 9 to 6, but from 9 to 1?
4, 9, 1.
Oh.
And then 9, and then 6, and then 5.
But from 9,
No, 9 has gone through twice.
right? But from 9 to 6, you're not going directly. See what I mean? You're going back to 1.
Oh, I see what she's saying.
The line.
Okay, hold on. It goes through 9.
It goes through 9.
Two,
See,
one,
that's the
and then
thing.
back to
It's
9.
4, 9, 1, and that line goes. See, the square, the whole block is available to you. Okay? Not just the dot and center.
Okay.
This is the different kinds of styles. These are the two styles. One of them, the intersecting style, yes, definitely uses the point in the center. So let's look at the top one.
Yeah.
So this little, and I always use these. Some people would use the little
backward C.
C, or the cup, or basically the satellite dish that is focusing the energy at that end. Anyway, back up. So 4. So I'm going from 4. So that's my starting point.
Mhm.
Make that mark. Start at 4. I go to 9. Come down to 1. Now when I come back up to 9, now that I'm doing 9 again, I put a circle there to mean that I've been here before and I'm back here again. Now, if I had something else and I had another 9, there'd be another circle. So 4, 9, 1, 9, 6, 5. From 5, I make the end point. Some people put a circle at the end, and sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't.
And
There's a number of
so
ways of doing that.
when you look at the moon, if you start at 4, 9, you go to 1, and then you cross over. So you didn't put a circle there, but he crossed.
Looped back up through
Because
9,
it's unicursal.
and then 6. Yeah, that's the whole. I don't lift the pin. So
So if he wanted to, he could have instead made that a circle to show.
if I were using this style, I would use the circle. This style becomes, I don't lift the pin. And that means that you end up with 2 sigils that look quite different. But even if I use if I were using the unicursal, okay.
You put it in here by the number by the letters of the alphabet, right?
Based on here.
based on how I've translated. So if I look at this, V is 4, I is 9, S is 1, I is 9, O is 6, N is 5.
So you got that.
Okay. So that's how I get these numbers.
That is really helpful.
Then,
Okay.
That's fine.
Do you need something?
Maybe. Maybe just try and push through it.
When we take a break, why don't you go look in the medicinal drawer and see if there's something there for stomach disease. Go ahead.
so I would do this, and then I would come down here, and then I would do up, and then I would come down here, and then I would come back.
Okay.
That kind of was what the unicursal style would look like. Now, obviously I do this with the computer so I can make actual straight lines.
What?
Then if I were doing the intersecting style on, which is
It would
probably,
be basically just a straight line through with a circle and the 9.
Yeah. A circle on the 9 and yeah.
so. Now, the thing about this is, and again, this goes back to what I had said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If you just saw that, you didn't know what word I had put on and you didn't know what square I had used, there is no way for anyone to know what that really meant.
Right, because there's so many combinations that are possible.
Yep.
Now you can do it with a computer program, you can just run through all the combinations and figure it out. But then, actually, I have a life.
I'm so sorry, but where does this symbol
That symbol came from here.
came from? What does it mean? Or what does it
It
mean?
means,
Beginning
okay.
and end.
so it means vision in Saturn.
So
it's what is a vision given the energy of Saturn?
this is
Saturn
me,
is the limit. No,
Yeah.
Saturn is the limit.
is the limited, the practical, and all that kind of stuff. So what I would do is, now, I get super extra fancy because I'm a smells and bells kind of person. So you got to have a black altar cloth because it's, so you got to have a black altar cloth and a black candle. I would probably do, because lead is gray, I would probably print this sigil in gray on black on something that, and because Vina is 3, I would make that triangular because this is how my mind works. I love this kind of thing. So it would be gray on a black triangle, and I would have my black candle on my black cloth, altar cloth and everything. And then I would probably make a nice Saturn incense.
Okay, okay, go ahead. I'm just behaving.
And then this is where I would do my visioning for the practical future. And then I would, set myself down and I would do, what the meditations that I would do. I would, leave your body and start looking into the future.
Because I have you with a sigil on your forehead, a special hat on, a ribbon around your body in black.
That's right. My black robe, black stole, we go, Now, on the other hand, if the question is, the question is, should I sign this piece of paper in the next hour? I'd probably put vision on Mercury and, I would print it out on a white piece of paper in black ink out of the printer and everything, and then just sit with it, energize it, put the energy of Mercury into it, what it is I'm looking for, put it on my lap, close my eyes, here we go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was like, dude, I don't have the patience.
Well, no. If I have the choice, then, we're talking about the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
If I need to do this right now, print it out, energize it, sit down, do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But that's what I would use it for. So now let's say that I was doing something. Let's say that I was doing something more practical. Again, I always, house hunting or job hunting or something like that is always a very practical thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's say that say that I'm up for a promotion at work. That would be very good for me. I would probably use Jupiter for that. Because Jupiter is about expansion, growth, and all that stuff. Promotion would be that. I'd probably use Jupiter for that. I might use the word promotion. What else a word would be good for that?
Advancement.
Advancement.
Raise.
Raise. Gimme. Gimme is always a good one. Rich bitch. Whatever. Gimme.
Mine.
Mine, all mine. But probably what I would do then is, if I had a little time, I would probably,
You're very high magic.
Jupiter is blue, and the metal associated with Jupiter is tin, which is kind of a silvery gray. I would probably, and Jupiter is 4, so that's a 4-sided square shape.
Where's the color?
These colors.
Oh, okay.
These are the colors I'm using. The Kabbalistic colors. And that's the kind of thing that I would charge up and then I would put in my pocket when I went to work.
Yeah.
Especially, and I would have it with me. And as, I encountered my boss and everything, I might touch that little energy into it while I'm talking to my boss or whoever it is that's going to be in control of it, to attract that energy to me.
Yeah.
How do you charge it?
Charging is usually, you can be very simple. It's kind of like what it is that you're looking for. So you're holding, you're holding it. You're just pushing energy into it.
Visualize.
You're visualizing. And one thing I do is, even though I've got it on a piece of paper and everything, is just trace it with my finger again, with energy coming out of my finger again, just keep tracing it over and over, like I'm wearing a groove into it. So, and understanding that a piece of paper will work for a bit,
Well, that's why sometimes, the thing is, that's why we sometimes use the candles to carve it in.
Right, exactly.
So that it has some substance and
lasts longer.
And then also, there's a thing of visualization where you make it 3-dimensional,
right?
And really visualizing with substance, and using the visualizing the actual metal is really helpful.
Right.
Because that's one of my gifts is visualization, and so you might find that helpful. The other thing is, even if piece of paper is not substantial as some other thing, right? You can make it more substantial in your energizing by making it more than a piece of paper. Right? It becomes the holder. It's sort of like when we it's like in the Hindu the ceremonies where you have a god sit down in the statue, is
right.
You have that energy sit down
right.
in that paper. And so, and right now I have something sitting in my hand because that's what happens when I talk about things.
One of the things that you do, another thing that you can do is to actually put it inside of a mojo bag.
Yeah.
So
wrap it around a piece of metal or whatever.
Right. The metal, if you have the metal, or like for Jupiter, tin is pretty easy to come by. The problem with Mercury, of course, is
well, yeah,
Quicksilver is not.
You don't want to put in your pocket.
Well,
So what? How do you know which metal?
It's right here.
It's on page 2.
So you see here, silver, tin, gold,
Thermometer.
silver, iron.
Just be real careful.
So you can
You know,
energize it
careful
by
with it.
bringing some of that metal. To
Yeah, except for Mercury.
Except for Mercury.
But
would
you
be
can
careful
get the
of that.
symbol for Mercury.
Mercury dimes are really effective.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's one thing I have is mercury dimes.
Yeah.
So, and then I would get this herb associated with Jupiter or something like that, put it in there, and the crystal, or, you know, all of those little things that you would do in a mojo bag. But the thing that I would add to it, to give that more focus, to add the antenna on top of the energy of those pieces, is to create the sigil and put it in the bag.
Put it in the bag. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Put it in the mojo bag with the other things. So now you've got this energy, and they're these particular energies, and they're
Makes
flowing
sense.
and moving. Now I have focused it. Now I have tuned it to a particular thing that I want, that I need, that I'm trying to accomplish, what I'm doing. I put that in there too, energized. Voila. It adds that much more to it. Again, you know, I use these a lot because they add that focus to the energy that I am working with in any kind of magical work.
And here's the thing I want to add, and this is the exact, once you've created something like this is the stuff you put into your journals. So you can use it again at another time.
Right.
You don't, you know, it's not something you make and throw away. If it's effective, you need to document it and how effective it was, so that this is how you create your own bag of tricks, your own set of tools.
Well, the other thing too is then you also know what to do to adjust it.
Yeah.
You think
For
about
the next time, yeah.
right, that wasn't as effective as it could have been, or I didn't accomplish exactly what it was I wanted. So let me look back at what I did and re-examine, or have somebody else re-examine what it is I did. Or maybe I missed something. Or maybe because I thought this herb was associated with Jupiter, but it really wasn't the best one for getting, really wasn't the best energy for what I was trying to accomplish. I should have used something else.
Or those things where you get a promotion, but there's no extra money.
Right.
Right. Here you get more jobs to do these. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's not what I was looking for. That's it.
Been there, done. Yeah. I have been in that place.
Yeah.
So that's why I left my last job.
Yeah.
How much life force can we suck out of him?
He's my dry husk.
That's right. More like with pod people and
Yeah.
dark crystal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Can we take a break now?
Sure. Your race.
You are
Sure,
free for a break until such time as we shall call you back. So you have until like 2:40, because it's 2:10 now. Yes. I know, time just stands still when Michael's here. We officially over? 5. Okay. No problem. Do you need anything?
I might get a little more coffee.
Where's yeah, what do you need?
There's peanut chips. Coffee.
Do you want coffee too as well?
I would just please.
Okay, never mind.
Now,
You might want to go up
probably,
and get some tea instead. Okay?
do you have any mint tea?
I might.
That would be best. If you had any peppermint or
There might be something in the medicinals or in the herbals. Rip that puppy! Whoa! We're not going to tell you what happened, but let's just say, woo! How you doing there, Caledon? What?
All right, sorry, I had my sound muted, so I didn't. You didn't hear my rude noises and dog barkings and things. But
Oh, yeah, we didn't hear any of that, so that's good.
good.
How you doing?
Yeah, no, it's good. The every so often, the sound gets tangled up and cuts out a bit, but it'll come back. So
Okay.
it's mostly good. And who knows where that's at. It actually helped when who is it? David J. One of the people
Muted?
dialing in. Muted, yes. Then that helps.
Yeah, I know. That's usually what happens is that folks forget to mute. Or my favorite, they mute and then they forget they're muted and try to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I do that all the time.
And that's usually when Faya, because, you know, she's so talkative.
So I also turned off my video. If that
Oh, okay, yeah.
so I turned
Save
off my
it.
video. I turned
To save bandwidth, yeah.
off my video to see if that would help too.
Yeah, it usually does. But thank you, Winfaya. Winfaya is our tried and true. The one that
Yeah,
keeps
maybe
you
I
on the
will
ball,
turn my
things like that.
my video feed off. I had it on and off trying, and it didn't seem to make a difference. But I may just turn it off just to do it. But,
Yeah, as long as you can see Michael.
Anyhow, great.
Yeah, he gives special signals with his eyes when he's flashing Morse code. So you might want to write Michael's giving you that look. I'll just turn this back around. Let's see.
Uh-oh. Oh, that's rude.
I never did that look normally. Well, no, Michael and I used to be the bad ones in Evo's classes.
I can't imagine that.
Not me.
Oh, yeah. We would sit there cracking up and he would threaten to put us apart like that matter. It didn't matter at all.
I was gonna say we could always,
Misbehave all by ourselves.
That's right. Across a crowded room.
So I was wondering if you noticed the sigil on the door. That's from Angela.
So it's a bind room. Looks like it has Degas, Isa, Othala. But again, when you're looking at that,
You can't tell.
you really can't tell. Although what I would say it probably is it's not designed to open that door to other places, is it? No? Okay. I wondered.
Yeah, it's basically saying, it's like you might not want to come in here if you don't have business here. So that was created by Angela.
Oh, okay. So there's the Taurus houses. Okay. Now, see, if you once you start giving that kind of information,
Then you look at it all
then you
different.
start looking at it differently.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, there's the Taurus houses, which are the active stay away, or the thorn rooms. I will stab you. So,
And who would be the person doing the stabbing?
and then, and then you look at the Isa, and the Isa is the stop.
Stop in the name of love.
But Degas is the one that is the one that says, okay, there can be this, in and out, this passing back and forth. So okay, yeah. Sometimes you can do that once you know what it's about, especially with bind rooms. You can start to take
Because
out
after a while, it's sort of like, well, this could be a this or this, 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 or this, or this, or this, or this, or this.
right.
And with that in mind,
because that's the thing about the rooms.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's lots of straight lines and angled lines. And then you lay them on top of each other, and you don't know that. I mean, that's what, when I drew this. So when I drew that, so this is Legus, that's the flow, but then you put Rado on top of it. There's a mechanism for that flow, for that traveling.
right.
But if you didn't know that Legus was underneath the Rado or combined with the Rado, you wouldn't necessarily know it was there.
Right.
Rado.
There were three, right?
Oh, Othala. The ancestor, Othala. I use the Elder Truth Arc, the 24.
You'll be teaching that. runes next time.
Yep. And we'll probably discuss, we'll discuss, the various things. We'll talk a little bit about the Anglo-Saxon and the Younger Futhark and all of that kind of stuff. But we're going to focus mostly on the Elder Futhark because that's what most people use and that's what's most common.
And because, all of that was like over my head.
Actually, Roa wrote a great book on the Elder Futhark because that's one because it's older. Because it's older. So that's exactly what she wanted.
Yes. No, I am. It's somebody was teasing me about something. Oh, thank you, sir.
I rated your cereal and dairy free.
There's yogurt.
That's not dairy free.
Oh, right.
Yeah, yogurt.
There's water. There's wine.
That's very.
There's Soylent.
I don't know what's in that.
People. Duh. And this one's black people. So it's delicious.
Only the green.
Yeah, the green would be the one that would be, those are the old leaders of the earth. The old ones, the ancient ones. They taste fantastic.
It's just fascinating, though. Thanks for all your additions and anecdotes.
Yeah.
Give me my promotion right now.
Right now.
You're already.
Not just more money, more power. Yeah, that's right.
More money, more power.
There you go. More money.
I already wrote promotion. Don't put the word promotion.
Yeah, you got.
What do you think of basil to throw in there? As an herb. I think fruits that I happen to have growing outside my door. Rosemary, thyme.
I'm not as good with those.
Bay.
And basil.
Hey.
Money.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
Pay
that's
for
fine.
money.
Yeah, that's fine.
But bay leaf also makes a great pastoral weapon.
And I have my. Oh, don't
Right.
bring your. Oh,
That's
what is
fine.
it? What's the other word pronouncing
Right.
Kathame?
There's athame.
Yeah, aftermath. Don't bring your aftermath to a big fight.
A thane. A thane is one of the other ones. Thane.
To a
Nice.
big
So
fight.
It's a knife.
And one of
Sacred
the-
weapon.
And you're free.
That's fine. I think that's fine. That's what I'll see you at 5.
Well, it's so funny because when I first started reading,
It's okay.
but before I had, met
Met
anybody,
people,
or-
yeah.
you look at that word. You look at that word, or like Lunasoft.
Yeah.
You look at that word, and it's like I haven't the foggiest. I know lasagna or
Lasagna. It's lasagna. That's what it is. Yeah.
so I remember when I first, when I was first studying with Lady Anne in a Gardnerian tradition in Charlotte, of all places.
That's right.
And she said these words out loud, and I'm like, oh, that's how you say it.
Well, that's how I was with generally words in general. Because, I grew up in Anacostia, but I had a huge vocabulary from reading. And I never heard the word spoken.
Yeah. So smart and so
So I never heard the word spoken.
Yeah.
Right?
I did it phonetically.
Yeah.
And Niffy.
Right. Yeah. So so I would say a word and everyone would look at me and I would go, and then I spell it. They would go, oh, you mean, and then they'd say the word. They go, oh, that's how that sounds. But yeah, no,
Those kind of situations are always so funny.
Yeah, that is exactly how it is for some people anyway. Finding out what the words sound like. So it's, to me, the magical equivalent is like, all right, somebody will tell me.
Somebody will tell me eventually
Yeah.
how they pronounce it, and then we'll fight about it.
And then we'll, and then,
4 or 5 people will fight about it.
right. And I'll stand there, like I said, I'm like, well, who looks like they might actually know what the hell they're talking about?
We might,
Well,
Yeah, who might
well,
know?
Michael, as a Yankee for the last 16 years, I'll vote for Sigil, but that's largely because I usually teach Sparian style sigilization, and saying the word sigilization just sounds silly. So it's got to be.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
You know what he said?
sigilization. Sigilization
So-
just doesn't work.
He said that he uses sigil because he talks about sigilization, and he thought that sigilization sounded weird. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, although I have had, Andy and I are currently having that fight. because
Over.
GIF is said GIF.
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 GIF. How do you pronounce GIF?
Gift.
GIF.
So you pronounce GIF, GIF.
Yes.
And then how do you pronounce JIF, as in the peanut butter?
GIF.
Okay.
Well, besides that.
Yeah. That's like, it was here and here.
You're not, it's not logical.
Yeah.
GIF is not logical.
So I'm gonna have to look about we're gonna have to probably over at 3.
Okay.
But you're recording the rest of this, right?
Yeah.
And I really apologize. This is amazing. I wish I could say that.
Nope.
We're glad you made it
Do your
for
thing.
the
Oh yeah.
Good.
You
You have the
handout.
handouts, and you'll be able to look at the recording. But yeah, no, I've had what was it? We used to what do you call the liquid that comes in a bottle like that? No, the bottle next to him. What do you call it?
That's a Coke.
So it's soda.
Soda or pop.
Yeah. So I was up in Detroit with my grandfather. He would always say, "You want some pop?"
That's right.
And I would go,
It's pop.
Oh yeah, okay. The
That's
generic
an example
soda.
of like how different things mean different things to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So it's really sometimes it's just hold on from what language that the person comes from, because we have so many loan words in English.
Oh yeah.
What happens is it'll be closer to whatever language was part of your ancestry is how it's going to be heard by you and read it.
Right.
So
Well,
it's not just a place, but it's also if you're out in the Midwest, especially in the northern, right, you're closer to the Nordic types, and you'll hear words pronounced with some of that knowledge and spice.
I can attest to this.
Yeah, and so that the correct pronunciation is that they think is based on where their ancestors are from, right?
Well, I remember my first time. I mean, I grew up in Tennessee. My mother was an RN, and she was bound and determined that we were not going to sound like anybody in her family. Because, they were Appalachian coal miners and all that kind of stuff, and their accents were incredibly heavy. And so she was bound and determined we were not going to sound like that. And I remember sitting on her lap, and she's saying words and having me repeat them over and over and over again until we had the correct pronunciation. Which is why a lot of people, they can hear it sometimes, but I don't have much of a Southern accent.
Except when you get excited about something.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Or if I say the word Charlotte.
Or we were down in North Carolina long enough where everybody was spoken Southern.
No, we had visited Epha and them down in North Carolina, and the longer I am around them, the more my accent comes back.
Yeah. No, it is very funny. No, I have that ear where whoever I'm around, I start talking like them.
Yes, me too.
And so what happened when I went to Club Med, my roommate was Russian, and the language that we heard all day in Club Med was a combination of English, Spanish, and French. And so I came back with a thick Russian accent of Spanish. I couldn't speak English. And so the line at the airport, for those, Americans, and then it was, everyone else. And I was one of, the American line was almost empty, and I'm over there and I can't speak English. And so, and I didn't have a passport because you didn't need one to go to Mexico then. So I'm showing my license and saying, EC!
People regularly now ask me if I'm Canadian, and I have to say, yo, I'm from Kentucky. I don't know what you're talking about. But apparently, you know, you fall for a couple of Canadians. You bow never the same.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I
And
remember
I haven't heard you say "eh." No.
I don't really do that. It's more the just the vowel sound.
The West Coast they get the A more.
Mm-hmm.
You hear
Hey,
that? And they end sentences. Everything sounds like almost a question.
something
Yes.
goes up.
Everything
Well,
goes up.
That's the whole West Coast.
Yeah, that's kind of sort of. Oh, Winfaya is on here twice.
that's
Yay!
because sometimes
I accidentally hung up.
we're wondering if that's really the truth.
I wouldn't fail.
Hi.
Oh, you sound so excited. Let me show you who's saying hi.
Hi.
Trading. Hi.
How are
There
you?
we go.
Hi,
Hi. I don't have my video on, so you don't see me.
And he had said something, and I said, and I texted back. It's kind of like, really? And then he said something else, and I said, really? But of course, when you text it, it just says, and he said, wait a second, what? And I said, the first really goes up. Really? The second really goes down.
Down.
Like, really?
But they're both questions.
So that's
Oh my gosh.
you could have included an up emoji and a
Down
down
emotion.
emoji.
That's why I thought
Huh.
You know what? People know us. There's a
And if they don't, what does that say about our relationship?
Exactly.
See, that's why I stab people. I was gonna say Jim is like me. It's like what?
Exactly. He had no idea what I was talking about.
What? I'm so confused.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's okay, David.
Jim and I have only been together for what, 26 years?
26 years, yeah. That's almost as. I've known you for 27.
27 years.
Yes.
That's right.
You should know which direction you really goes.
He should know.
He should
But
know.
the first one was a question, and the second one was a declarative.
In the form of a question. That's right. Oh no, that's too funny. Yeah.
What do we want to do next?
I'm not quite literal, but I'm very close. Right, Adam. You didn't bring lunch? You didn't bring anything else to eat?
I brought lunch. I ate it earlier.
And so you're just still hungry.
I feel hungry, so I have to
Okay.
put something in my stomach. Otherwise, we'll get to 5 o'clock and Adam will be bitchy party of 1.
That's true. We don't want that.
No one wants that.
So we're almost ready.
Fine.
So, she's back. Okay, and that was the secret part.
Secret teaching of all ages.
Yeah.
With that, you can rule the universe.
Wow, domination.
Oh, sorry, I got that left up.
Yeah, I'll be right there. I don't think Harper needs help with that.
I wish. Anyway,
So, how are folks doing? Folks okay? Okay. So,
I'm gonna step away for a few while I cook something. So
okay.
I'll still be on. I'll just be muted.
your control elements are dephasing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, nothing's on fire yet, so there's that.
I told you that I'm on my best behavior.
I know you are. I appreciate it too.
The hobby. What is this word you speak of?
She's always very much on her best behavior when there's a guest speaker. I mean, this is her best behavior. So.
Yeah, this is the best that you're gonna get. Yeah.
Zoe likes to say that in most circumstances, all that she can promise is her second best behavior.
Yes.
And Zoe will say, okay, second best behavior. I'm watching.
Yes. Thank you for the wording. Oh.
So does anybody have any questions or comments or quandaries or question at this point?
We did. I lost it.
Those write down questions.
Fiddlesticks. Yep.
How many times have I said that?
7.
So was it about magic squares?
It might have been.
Mm-hmm. And it's probably too late for me to do rings of remembrance, which don't work very well. Damn New Age. Sometimes other things work.
But you're doing it to the whole room.
Oh, sorry.
Does anybody online have any questions, queries, quandaries,
Answers,
answers?
insights. any
When
of that
Faya
stuff.
does, that's why she unmuted.
I unmuted to be a part of the conversation, but I don't have anything specifically.
Okay, when Faya, can you explain
Oh.
back to him everything he just went over?
Oh, sure. Here we go.
Why would you punish her like that?
Because Faya doesn't want to talk at all. Go ahead, honey.
That's not it. So one of the things, actually, this came up in a past meeting, and you had it on the outline as the beginning, but we kind of just went over it. We didn't talk about it. Differentiating. Is there anything to differentiate a sigil versus a sign versus?
Versus a symbol.
Correct.
Oftentimes, the easiest way to think about this, and a sign and a symbol generally represent the same kind of thing. In general, a sigil is an artificially created glyph that represents a combination of energies, whereas a symbol usually is a standalone item that does not necessarily include a variety of different elements drawn together to create this glyph. So, for example, when you look on this page, and down toward the bottom, you see the one that says High Magic. Right? This is an example of using the magic squares and combining two different words. Now, understand that this particular pattern is one that I sometimes use as well, where the circle is the beginning, and that little dash line at the end, that's the end point. So, understanding that creating sigils that way, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. But it's two separate words done on the same
Magic square.
magic square to create this glyph, this sigil. Next to it is the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus is not a sigil per se, but it is a symbol, i.e., it is created as a representation of the energy of the eye, but it's not based on putting things together, disparate elements together. I mean, you can deconstruct this if you want to. And in fact, the ancient Egyptians also used this
For measurement, isn't it?
is for fractions.
For fractions. Yeah, 63, 64.
Right, 63 64ths.
Yep.
So, which means that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Right?
But you can't say that I used runes or magic squares or I went through a process of words or anything like that. This symbol was created as is. And in and of itself, it is a wholeness. So that's kind of the difference. If you look over where I have the bind rooms, and I created these magical bind rooms, these used to be magical names that I had. And it's kind of like, so there's the runes, and then there's the thing that I created, the bind room that I created to represent myself. So you can see the origin. That's a sigil. Okay? The Ankh, on the other hand, now, again, I can deconstruct this Ankh. but it is a wholeness of itself. The parts don't really have any indication of what it's about. Now that really gets a little bit wonky, because again, I can take the Ankh apart. You know, I have this basically a circle, you know, that eternal wholeness. I have that line, which is you might say the line of manifestation. That's that barrier, that border. Then I have a descending line, which is wholeness, that completion, or that eternal, coming through the barrier and coming down into manifestation, or descending down. Normally, and then you also have part of it as one of the things about the cross sign is oftentimes that is a symbol that actually represents the manifest. So, you know, you can do that, but you don't have to. You can just use the Ankh, just use the I. High magic, on the other hand, didn't exist before I created this, even though I used the tools that we're talking about to create the sigil, and has no special meaning beyond what I am doing with it. Other people could use it if they like, but, you know. So in a lot of ways, it's the same thing with the astrological pieces. You can deconstruct these. You know, Saturn represents, but you have the cross of manifestation, you have a descent. You have a descent down from manifestation into the deeper. But then there's this rise. So there is this rise back up and then another fall back down. So, and that's an entirely different class.
Yeah,
You know,
each of the glyphs have meanings.
Have meaning that you can actually deconstruct them.
But I'm sure like this is a symbol that's been around for like a long time.
Oh, yeah. It was not created as a sigil.
But
That's almost like
And in some
it
ways,
still probably manifests a certain kind of energy.
oh yeah, yeah. And the thing about it is usually a symbol, like these symbols, again, you said they were around for a long time. We're looking at these things with modern eyes based on how we understand, again, our worldview and how the universe works. The ancient Egyptians, it's difficult to know exactly what they had in mind when they created that. Because
Or whether they were creating or whether they were scribing what they saw.
What they saw. I mean, some people would say that it looks like the strap of sandal, you know, but I think that's a stretch. On the other hand,
I just ordered some today.
Okay.
on the other hand, the Ankh, it's so funny. The Ankh is one of those. The Ankh is one of those interesting symbols that modern people use a lot as an amulet. People wear it all the time. And everything. In ancient Egypt, there were no Ankh amulets.
Right.
The only time you ever saw the Ankh was in vignettes, in the paintings and stuff, and they were inevitably being held by the gods.
Right.
Not by humans.
Right.
The Ankh was not something humans used, it was something the gods used. And so when they deconstruct mummies and they find amulets inside of the wrappings and stuff like that, there's never an Ankh.
Right.
You found the Jet pillar, things and the knot of Isis and different things like that.
People
for some
adore to.
But interestingly enough, modern people, on the other hand,
Well, we make everything something we can carry, put on our computers and our backpacks or on our jackets or vests, everything for everything. Even as a person had all that on her pea coat back in the day. But here's the thing that's interesting, and that's why I said I made the point that we don't know if how it was put together, whether it was created or it was seen and then scribed after having had a vision,
Having been shown.
shown by any means. And so we don't know how many of these come from nature, how many of these come from visions, how many of these they actually thought about the creation of it. And so most of the time the age of it makes it a symbol.
That's
Is
true.
that because there's like a collective consciousness around that?
Well, it's that we don't know the source. So the thing is that if it's around long enough, it becomes a symbol. And so it's no longer, if it had been something created, we have no knowledge nor access to that wisdom. And so as far as we're concerned, at this stage, it's a symbol.
It's a symbol.
And so, and that happens a lot. And so I know, what was her name? Star Harps did the thing, Maria Gimbutas,
Right.
where she
Yeah.
looked at all those symbols that were across all these, ancient sites and started seeing, there was patterns here, right? And so the thing is that, the reason why those are considered symbols is because they come already formed. Like, so anything like if you have a tradition, when you guys get to like the 4th and 5th iteration all the way in the future, that some of the sigils you guys have created to future generations will be symbols to them, and they'll be holy symbols, and they won't be able to say, and this means this, 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 and this.
Well, hopefully we will have provided them enough
Yeah.
to say.
Or when they're digging out the new
1,000
Alexandrian library,
1,000 years from now, and they dig these up and they say these are real cool.
while they're wearing their toilet seat. What story is that?
That's the Hotel of the Mysteries.
Yes.
Motel of the Mysteries is a really great book about, and it's 100% satire, poking fun at all archaeologists and Egyptologists. Because what it is, and this is, I think this is important when we're talking about symbols.
Yes.
So what it is sometime, in the next year or two, or actually I think this happened like 10 years ago, somehow the United States got buried under 4,000 feet worth of dirt. So about 600 or 700 years later, archaeologists come and they start digging up where America used to be. And they come across a motel. Well, of course, they don't know what any of these things are. So they come across this building. And this building is made up of a series of discrete rooms. And inside the room is this flat surface upon which they have found a number of skeletons. It is facing a long table-like object upon which is a black box with a shiny front that this platform is facing, and upon which the skeleton that is on there is looking in that direction. In an antechamber, in this room off the side, there's this large porcelain basin, and then a smaller porcelain basin. So they start, of course, turning all of this into, this is all for ritual purposes. This is all ritualistic. Obviously these are tombs upon which the ancient Americans buried their dead. One of the incantations, there was a piece of paper across one of the basins, with the ancient incantation, sanitize for your protection. And it just gets more outlandish from there.
Because, everything the archaeologists ever dig up is always ceremonial.
Ceremonial. It's for ritual purposes.
Ritual purposes.
You mentioned, we talked about one once in this, but what's the name of it again?
Motel of the Mysteries.
Motel of the Mysteries.
Actually, I think it's been reprinted.
Yeah.
So,
but
next time I come up, when I come and do it, I'll bring it because I've got a copy of it. It's absolutely hilarious.
But the idea that if you look at what archaeologists have actually done, it is so spot on. It is so spot on.
Well,
Remember the cakes for the Queen of Heaven, right? Because they couldn't figure out what the women were. They just were carrying these circular things, and so the men decided, well, obviously they're bringing bread. They're bringing cakes to the temple because that's what women do, right? They bring food. And so it was these women drummers at the temple. They turned them all into they're bringing the food for the ceremony because it's always ceremonial. Everything's fucking ceremonial, right?
well, and this is getting way off base, but
But the symbols, yeah. The symbols, yeah.
But usually when I do the Egyptian classes, I always put that quote up from Sir Alan Gardner that said, basically, and he was an Egyptologist, a very famous Egyptologist, and what he said was, what we hold up as ancient Egyptian history is nothing more than a collection of rags and tatters. It's like, something could be uncovered tomorrow that would overthrow the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And it has actually happened.
Exactly, happy.
Especially within the Mayan mythology.
Yeah.
But by the same token, which is why it's important to understand what these things are about before you start putting them on.
Important things, yes. It's not quite as bad as putting Chinese for idiot on your shirt or tattooing it on your body. Or I've seen some of the English tattoos that some of the Asian youth have. I go, oh, honey. But yeah.
Well,
similarly,
and I think that's important. I think that's an important thing when you're thinking about the creation of sigils. Now, you really need to have you really need to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. Okay? This is where it goes back to intention is important. What is it that you're really trying to accomplish? What am I doing? What is my intent? What is the outcome that I am looking for? I mean, I think it's important that you practice these things, that you think about things and that you practice putting them together. Because I'll tell you, especially when we had talked about earlier, about creating something that actually engages the person that's using it. And unless it will engage you, then it won't be effective, even if it is technically, even though it is a technically, accurate, it won't work in and of itself. There's no involvement of the human. Then it's just lines on a piece of paper. So, and then being real clear about, when you're talking about, especially when you're talking about the magic squares, and you begin to work with these planetary holistic forces. Okay, which one is really, what is it that I'm really looking to do? What's going to be the most appropriate to what it is that I want this outcome to be? Oftentimes, we think about magic in terms of, well, I'm going to do these things. It's kind of like, so to what end? That's my Jim's. When he sits in the coven, and they're planning rituals, and they're talking about, everybody wants to start with, let's do this thing, because we all like doing these things, because they're great. It's like, to what end?
Why are you doing this?
Why are you doing it?
that's why we always in Connect UC start with intention. Right? We have a discussion of intention before we discuss the ritual. Yeah.
Right. You gotta know what your intention is. You need to know what the outcome that you're looking for, because the gods will provide you with an outcome if you don't.
Yeah, they have their own agendas.
They have their own
Especially
agendas.
if you called them in. They were like, well, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Let me tell you something.
Right. And sometimes they just like to amuse themselves.
Well, there's that.
Especially some of them like to amuse themselves.
So mine like to amuse themselves.
But the reason that's a lot of that is important is because when it comes down to the actual creation of a sigil, you're really reducing. Think about all the steps that you go through, and these are the outcomes I'm looking for, and this is the process by which, and this is what I would like to have happen, and these are the kinds of things I'm going to do. And there's all these different pieces and everything, and I need some of this energy, and some of this energy, and some of this energy, and now I'm going to condense all of that down into a line.
And
Yeah,
that's like, you think about it this way. If you're making a soup, and some of you are cooks, and you're making broth, right? And you're going to get this down to its essence. How much salt do you want to put in there? And that's an important question. Like how much herbs? Because what happens most of the time, it reduces. That means it concentrates it, right? And so you got to be damn careful because whatever you put in is going to get concentrated, and so it's going to get what? Stronger, right? And so you have to think, what is the end result that I'm trying to produce, not just the beginning. So it's just like when I used to do, when I would make iced tea, right? We would always sweeten it first, and so we sweeten it while it was hot, right? So the sugar dissolves, right? But in iced tea, it's going to be dissolved. It's going to get bigger, right? So you need to put enough in that when you add ice, it doesn't turn into like, was there tea in here at some point, right? You know, kind of thing. So with sigils, you're doing the concentration. It's like the big, you know, pot of broth is going to become consomme or whatever, right? Because you want to be able to add that broth to something and it take on a larger quality, right? So the thing is, you don't want to produce something that's just salt. So you're very careful with what you add in the beginning. Well, it's the same thing as what you're saying about a sigil. You're going to bring all this stuff together and everything's going to have its place.
Right. But everything is going to be concentrated. Yeah. But everything is going to be concentrated. And anytime you concentrate or anytime you reduce, okay, there are details that are inevitably going to fall out. Now, when you do that reduction, you have to be careful about, you have to be mindful of, okay, these details, I have them in my head, you know, this is all these details and everything, but then when I turn it into this sigil thing, all of those details, a lot of those details are going to disappear. Because you're coming down to the essence of that. And so, you know, it takes, like I said, I think that when you're first doing this, I like to suggest that people, you know, focus a little bit more on more practical things, you know, before you start getting deep into high magic. And
you know, taking over the world is not taking over my first sigil.
Well, that's practical.
Do what? What should be there? What you say?
Taking over the world.
World domination.
Is her practical.
That's my first sigil that I practice. Not my first. The next one I work on.
Well, you know, before you start getting into sigils for magic to transform yourself or to, you know, doing the kind of rituals that, you know, unlock shadow work and things of that nature. Yeah, let's practice on some, you know, before I create my shadow work sigil to, you know, lance that boil.
Don't do it.
I've never understood how it is that, you know, you can have more than a lifetime's worth of shadow work created in less than a lifetime. But anyway.
Hey. I can tell you how, but you won't like it.
That's logarithmic, arithmetic. All right. So I think the other thing too, I have down here and about how they're made, and you know, we're talking about repetitive tools and things like that. But one thing I think we sometimes forget about is, you know, this goes back to the beginning, where you're using divinatory techniques, vision, casting runes, tarot, whatever you use for that kind of divinatory work to clarify intentions. You know, to actually, so I have an idea about what it is that I want to accomplish. I have an idea about the outcome that my conscious mind is interested in, that my monkey brain is interested in. So I immediately rush off to the computer, pull up the magic square. There we go. Not taking into consideration what the lower self might be engaged in, or the higher self might want, or if I'm working with ancestors, or if I'm working with guides, or I'm working with the gods of God, what's involved with them as well, you know. And this is getting back to the basic intentionality kind of thing, and what would be the best outcome. I don't always know what the best outcome would be, so I'm going to need help with this. So this is that kind of thing is just basic magical, you know, ritual technique kind of thing. Creating of sigils is not a method by which one bypasses that or skips the steps. You know, this is additive. This is an additional piece. And when you get into the idea of, you know, using it for practical things, I certainly have never really had a work problem. But I used to have a sigil. That I had it on a piece of paper, and I would keep that in the desk drawer. This is when I used to work in an office. And then, you know, because I was one of those kinds of people, everybody just thought they could come into my office at any time and just ask me any question they wanted to, you know, and then I never got any work done because I was helping everybody else with their work. So I had a sigil, and I kept it in my desk drawer, and I would pull it out, I would put it on my desk, and then I would trace that sigil on the entrance to my cube. And it was the leave me alone. It was the leave me alone sigil. You know, again, I had done it on the square. I had done it on the square of Saturn. Saturn is often the scariest. I'm trying to remember the word I used. I think it was 2. And I had just strung them together in 1. And I think it was go away. Just something very simple, go away. And I never put the paper there. You know, the paper was just sitting on my desk. And usually it was face down. Because you know how sometimes, you know how oftentimes you can make your energy very spiky, and then you can keep people away from you and all that kind of stuff. But you know how sometimes, most of the time, that doesn't work on like mosquitoes or gnats or anything like that because they're not sensitive enough. You know, they don't have enough. They don't have enough consciousness within them to be affected by that kind of thing. Well, there are humans like that.
Yeah, that's why I said some perverts.
You know,
It's like,
so it doesn't work all the time.
That's right.
It doesn't work all the time because some people are just that insensitive.
Ooh, spikes!
That's right. But it worked a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and it made things quiet.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the things, because I was trying to remember, was it the Mercury planetary seal, or was there a sigil that I know that Dark Flame we use for communication?
I think you all use the planetary seal.
Okay.
Now, the planetary seals are very, very good at attracting this particular energy in the raw. And that's one thing to be mindful of when you use these seals. And they call them seals. I might refer to them as symbols. I don't usually call them sigils because, again, deconstructing them, there's nothing obvious about them. If you lay these symbols
on top of their
square, it doesn't really match up to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Mars and Venus, which are the 2 oddballs in this. You notice how everybody else is very symmetrical.
Though.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah, you're right. They're that's true.
Mars and Venus are
They're
the
not
ones.
symmetrical at all.
They're not at all symmetrical. Now, Kabbalah is in a different, because that has to do with this relationship.
Yeah.
Here, across different.
Yeah.
These 2. And Because this, Hesed Dahad, this is the mentor relationship. And this, Gevurah Netzach, is the,
Would it be control?
what? Control. No. This one is the, oh shoot. Word went out of my head. Not correspondent relationship.
I'm talking about the, it's not complementary, it's,
You could call it, shoot.
yeah, I can't think of it now. They're the, they're polarities in the color thing for the same reason. Like you don't have yellow and green, not yellow and green, red and green are not usually, they're considered opposites. Like there's
Right.
nothing in green that has red in it.
Right.
So they're completely antithetical. And I can't think of what you're trying to say, but yeah, there is a term for that.
Right. So that particular,
Complementary?
I want to say
It's the other
it's the other one. But anyway, it
But
gets
yeah.
into the Kabbalistic patterns. But just to understand that, yes, these sigils or these seals are very useful and they're very potent. But they are giving you very much the raw planetary energy. In other words, you have to provide all the intention.
Yeah.
Because if you use them, when you use them, you're just opening the tap and letting that energy flow in. And again, the last time we did climbing the tree, I was doing Hesed, and I used the Jupiter sigil on everywhere. And
Sneaky.
well, people need an experience.
Well, when I was on Gevurah, I gave it an experience. Some people still cross the street. And that was over 20 years, that's almost 20 years ago. But yeah.
So just be mindful of that particular thing.
So when would you use a seal versus your own sigil?
Well, again, let's say that that's what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Say that the coven is working on something, and they need. Well, let's go back to what you were talking about with using Mercury for communication. You could create, a sigil of the word communication. Now you might reduce that, and that's another thing you had talked about this one earlier. Where you remove repeating letters. Sometimes you do that. I usually don't, but sometimes when you're looking at really long words,
You really not-
it's kind of like and since you're using 1 to 9, then you get this thing that's like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So sometimes I reduce the letters just because, again, you're eliminating some detail, but I'm eliminating that detail on purpose, not by accident. So you would create that community, and then it would have the flavor of y'all, or how all y'all. It would have the flavor of the operators that created it.
Right.
Okay. Now that might be exactly what you want, but it sort of at the root of that, then perhaps what it is that you need that raw Mercury energy to just power it. So in that particular case, what I might do is use the seal of Mercury as like the foundation piece. And I have done this one before, where, for example, what I've really been looking for is the sun energy. That particular set of energies and the different balancing, energizing energy and all that kind of stuff. And then have that seal energized as the foundation thing. And then on top of that, I have put, here's my particular sigil. Here is the symbol that I'm using. Or to use this as a foundation thing for energizing. So I would create my sigil and everything, and then in whatever way I was going to, let's say it was something that was larger than just, I need a raise. Or let me rephrase that. Something I need to do immediately, and I just create something and off we go. Versus, this is important. I need this raise. I need this promotion. I need to get out of where I am. Therefore, I need this mortgage. I need this car loan. I need this whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's of that nature, and I've got the time to do it. Then I would create my sigil. Okay, here's my on Magic Squares, or I create a bind room. I create whatever it is I'm going to use as part of the mojo bag or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would use this to help me energize it.
And say you were trying to do something expansive that you wanted it to reach out far, you might use a combination of Jupiter and Mercury, or you would do a, you can make a sigil on both of those magic squares.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if
Yeah.
we wanted to combine them in a different way, let's say that what I want is, so I've written a book. And now I need to attract a publisher so that it will be published and spread everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I would create my, whatever it is, the sigil I'm going to use as a representation of the book being published. Let's say that that's the thing. I might do that on Mercury. We'll talk about words, we talk about, publication, all that kind of stuff. But because I want it, but to energize it, I might use sun because it's shiny.
Yeah.
And now it's bright and attractive. Or I might use Venus for that too, because now it's important, it's beautiful and that kind of thing. That's the energy I'm adding to on top of it. Or I might use Jupiter in I would like for this to be everywhere.
New York.
So now I've combined. So now I've combined these energies.
This is the Voltron of sigils.
Right. What I would not suggest.
Yeah.
And now you can try it.
Wasn't you the one that said you was going to play Dolores's trip to the
I was going to do
4 times over and over so you can reach
so I could just disappear. Become one with the universe.
That's right.
She has a set of path workings, with both the spheres, one for the spheres, one for the paths, and I was going to string the lightning flash from Malkuth to Keter and just listen to them in a sequence until, I burst.
Till he burst into flame or disappear. But we stopped.
But what I would do, what I don't suggest, you can experiment with it, but I've not been very successful with this. Because it's almost like it's putting too much into a single thing.
Yeah.
Is to take the same word on 2 different squares and then put those sigils together.
Yeah.
Or take one word on this square and one word on this square and then put them together. It's almost like at that level, they conflict with each other.
Okay.
On the other hand, doing it this way, where I create a sigil on this square, but then I want this energizing energy, that's not specific to the working I'm doing, just to pour into it. That seems to work okay.
Okay, that's a good, that's good.
So, now, again, you can experiment with it. So
your mileage may vary.
So let's. I have to actually go, but I want to, or my group will be here. But I just want to say thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're a great lecturer, and you obviously have a lot of experience. And at least I can, we'll have a Wednesday night thing.
All right, sweetie.
It was nice to see you. It was nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Adam, somebody's saying nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I have 6 more minutes where I can listen to your wisdom.
Oh my God. Let's not do that. Yeah.
So I have a question, which is, what's the difference between what you just talked about making 2 very specific sigils and this?
Okay, this is 2 words on the same square.
Got it.
So that's 2 words on the same square. Now, and I wouldn't go more than 3 words.
Oh man, I was gonna put like the the Gettysburg Address on.
That will be, well, the problem with that, here's the real problem with that, is can you can you hold that in your mind? Or when you're energizing it and you're tracing it, can you actually separate those words in such a way that you can score? So, think practical.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Harper. I will apologize on his behalf.
You are. We've all accepted a certain amount of limitation by coming into manifestation. So one of them is that we can't hold the contents of the universe in our brain.
That's right.
And pick out the details.
No, I was just wanted to make sure that point was there. That at some point it actually goes against you and your ability to make sense of it all.
Right. To work it, and that's where you start getting into complicated sigils and complicated sigils or symbols and things of that nature, and it's kind of like you spend too much of your energy trying to remember what it looks like, and not enough energy actually using it to do what you want it to do.
There's a limit. There's a limit on returns.
Yep.
So
you are in diminishing returns.
Yeah. So don't make it so complicated that it actually gets in your way.
This goes back to one of the things that you use. This is a tool that you use to assist you in accomplishing your intention and creating your outcome. And if it takes more energy to hold the tool in your hand than it does to actually use it, then it's not a very effective tool. So, don't get, you can. People can do whatever they want. This is my suggestion. My experience, because when I first got my hands on these things, oh my God, it was a little bit crazy. Okay, it was a lot crazy. The other thing too is that I found myself using them all the time, and it's kind of like, again, it goes back to what's my intention and what's my outcome. Well, a sigil would be good here. Would it?
Yeah. I told the
Would
story
it be part of that
I was using the I Ching every day going to work because I was having such a hard time. So every single day, and I got to the hexagram that said stop using the I Ching.
Exactly.
So,
Well, usually that was me with runes. And I'm pulling a rune every day, and then what happens with runes is you get to the same rune
over and
over again. It's kind of like saying, you haven't dealt with this one yet. Or the same thing with tarot cards. It's kind of like, oh, I shuffled these really good, and I drew the same tarot card again.
Yeah.
It's like,
You're not listening to the message.
That's right. You're not listening to the message. It's kind of like, because I don't want to. You can't make me.
So, but yeah.
But
so, if you find yourself like if what you're using to create, you're getting yourself more and more confused with, that's the sign that you should pull back some and start again with really looking at what it is you're trying to create and for what purpose.
Right. And simpler is going to be better. Simpler is going to be better. Because again, you're drawing in frequencies of energy. How much can you manage? If you've been doing this, even people who have been doing this for a very long time know that they can't manage everything. They just can't. And so you can manage a lot. And as you get more and more experience, you'll find that you can manage more and more things. And you can hold more and more things in your head and do, and manipulate more and more types of energy more easily. But there is ultimately a limit. You accepted that limit when you came into manifestation. When you run up against it, and then you decide, this shall not be my limit. That's where you blow a fuse, and then you find yourself going, I guess I shouldn't have done that. Because I've been there too. It's kind of like, I did that. That was with something completely different. That was with Sweat Lodge.
I thought it was going to be Kabbalah.
No, Kabbalah hadn't gotten me. It was Sweat Lodge, and I was doing it all the time.
Oh, that's right.
And I couldn't not pour and all of this kind of stuff. And finally, I pushed myself beyond the point. And my teacher, she came to, when I finally popped, my teacher came and said, "You're in a day. No lodge for you. No pouring. No sweating. Nothing. You're in a day." And I was like, I guess I learned that lesson. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But back to Sigils. Now, I don't have it here. She talks about it, and Lars Arpal talks about it, and that is using none of these. Actually thinking about your personal symbol sets, and then something that's more common symbol sets. For example, we all tend to have an idea of what we mean or what we think about when we think about the pentagram, the five-pointed star. And, the symbol for the moon, arrows, also, these gestalt figures that we talked about, triangles, squares.
Yeah, somewhere I have like a list of those kinds of symbols.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I put on here, I talk about dictionary of symbols.
Yeah.
I wish I had brought my copy. I had intended to, and of course I have a book at home called the Dictionary of Symbols.
Actually, I have one too.
It's about that thick.
Yeah.
And it's classified in.
Are you allowing me to go find it?
Yeah, go look in the section under the psychology section. No, it's on the front wall. See if there's the Dictionary of Symbols is there.
So take a look at that.
The symbol
that's sitting there
on the front of the altar.
On the front of the altar. So you have triangle. You have what I would call an inward spiral.
Yeah, it's actually
You
it's
have
a sigil.
You have a heart shape.
It's a sigil, yes.
Right. So you have a sigil. Not done on the magic square.
Nope.
Doesn't involve any runes.
Yep.
So, again, going back to those basic symbols and thinking about creating things of that nature. Rolling Stars sigil was an 8-rayed sun in gold and a 3-peaked mountain in gold and silver with 2 crescent moons and then a pentacle at the bottom. So the 8-rayed sun was the wheel of the year, the 8 holidays. The waxing and waning moon, the 7-pointed mountain, because it had the 3 peaks, but there were 7 points altogether, represented the 7 elder planets and the lightning flash at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dark circle with the pentacle at the bottom, black, silver on black, represented the dark moon, but it also represented that gateway to mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So that was their signal.
Yeah.
So it was easy to visualize, it's easy to describe, all that kind of stuff. Was not created using the magic squares, was not created using runes and everything, but it was created thinking about what is it that we want to represent. And then how do we represent that? With these, like I said, these gestalt symbols, like the 8-rayed sun and the pentacle and the mountain.
So if you can lift that up. Oh, I don't know if this is one you're thinking of, but this is words.
This is words.
Yeah.
Words.
Words. Can you lift up the painting that Angela did for? Yeah. This is a combination of the alchemical symbol for fire, and that symbol on top is the order symbol for warrior.
Okay.
And it's the warrior, and you're right, it's the warrior's heart. And that defensive line, that straight, is the defending that which is most precious, which is at the center.
So when you think about that, think about the variation that you're looking at. There's obviously a heart shape there without being explicitly a heart.
Right. Do you see it?
Yeah.
This is where the creativity of the individual can come forth in by taking your own vision and finding the symbols that represent those pieces. So, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, and it has a potency that every time I walk in here, I always see it.
Well, you're always here in the summer.
I'm always here in the summertime.
Oh, good. Yeah, she made one for every
all the
seasons. Yeah, and they're beautiful. They're all beautiful.
You usually have me here in the summer because you know that I don't like the heat.
That's right.
So.
I tried to get Jim D here.
You
gotta
know,
figure out a reason to get Jim D here, but it didn't work.
all of these are here. We can show them.
Yes, they're in the moon room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, guess what I opened up to?
Oh, look, the magic squares. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the Kamea.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure where that word
Yeah,
comes
they're in
from.
here under Magic Square.
Yeah.
This is actually a really good book.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not the visual one you were thinking of.
It's not the visual. I have one that's a visual one, and it's actually divided up in the, straight line with curve, closed,
Send me a photograph of it.
open symbol, closed. I mean, it really gets into and it has a ton of stuff that is completely useless.
Oh
from a
yeah, but I
magical
still,
perspective.
because this is for my archetypal work.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it
Send me
also-
a photograph of it.
Okay.
Wow, there you go.
Ah,
So guess which element that is.
so that's Earth. You
Yeah.
have the seed.
Yep. There you go.
So you have the seed, and you have the ground, and you have the act of planting.
Very good. Not bad. That's actually the water, and you'll see that when you see the water one.
Turn around, let them see it.
There you go.
These
Wait,
must
wait,
be-
There
must be
you
this
go.
way.
Yeah.
I was going to say, looking at the alchemical, okay, I see. So then you have the flow.
There you go.
It's all flow. All flow, all the time. Very cool.
Yeah.
Air. I need air. Now, what's interesting about air is that you have kind of the reflection of the seed, but you also have the eye.
Yep.
You have the eye, and you have the vision, and then you have the receptive curve.
So actually, yeah, this is the eye. So it's the alchemical symbol for air, but the eye is bisected because you have to be able to see not just in this world, but in the next. And you have to be able to bring what you see back into this world.
Yep. You have to have the descent.
Oh, I just got. So these are the sigils. Those sigils were gifted to me. I had to sit. I was forced to sit in front of a big pile of newsprint and draw sigils for hours. And then I had to hang them all over the walls. And I had to sit in them. And then finally I'd go, warrior, artist,
Right.
healer,
You see, and that's the important.
steward. Yeah.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
What's interesting, or what connects those, and I'll say this, what connects those to a more eternal energy
Mm-hmm.
is the use of the alchemical triangles. So you're using the alchemical triangles. You're talking about something that's been around for a very long time and is attached to a gestalt, has an energy all of its own that has nothing to do with any of us. And yet, on top of that, or intertwined with that, you have very personal, very distinctive symbols that represent those particular patterns for the individual.
Mm-hmm.
You can use purely personal symbols. When you do that, you are attaching them purely to
yourself.
yourself and your energy. But you can root them in something that has an energy all of its own. That's what these do.
Yeah.
You know? And so the potency of them arises from those two things. The combination of the very intimate and, in some ways, the very public.
Well, what's interesting is that we use them almost exclusively in the astral. We don't use them, and so we don't.
But the other side of that is
Yeah.
they're also very simple and straightforward.
Yeah,
They're very easy to hold in the mind.
yeah, and they're very illustrative of a principle that, and we teach, within the order, we talk about those a lot. And we talk about it amongst the students, and I teach them when I go out. And there's a reason for that, because some of this is not just about us.
Right.
But yeah. And so what happens is that since we use them as holders for those specific, we call them archetypes, but we have gods who have stepped forward for each one. So they bring with it. It's a very potent, it's layered, and it's very much a part of our work. And so it may have been come through me, but they're bigger than me. And so that, yeah.
Well, and then once you have something like that, it becomes, in many ways, like you said, it becomes self-powered. It becomes inhabited. Something, whether it's the divine or some other god or something like that, may use it as a gateway portal to connect to you. That's now. You create those
Right.
on purpose. When you're thinking about creating something like that, make sure that you have a clear intention of this is what I'm wanting to create with this. Because you don't want just anything being attracted to them.
Yeah, you have to be really keen. One of the reasons why I like the magic squares, even though this is the first time I really think I got it, how it's used, because every time Evo just says, here's the magic squares and moves on. So thank you. Is that it gives you a system to base things on. Right. Because doing with letters, sometimes trying to find that balance of interesting and enough articulation can be maddening. And our sigil for the order is made that way.
A lot of doodling.
Yeah, and teaching it is murder, because it is not simple.
No.
So, but the magic square, you can sort of say, and here's how we created it, right? So that's a lot easier to pass on and teach.
I mean, I know for myself, doing it. And one of the things too, you need to follow your intuition about some of these things, because, I have started making signals on the magic square. I have started bind runes, and I have decided this is what it's going to be, and all of this kind of stuff, and I have tinkered with it, and I have tinkered with it, and I have tinkered with it. And it's not right, and it's not right, and it's not right, and it's not right. And then finally you get it's kind of like, don't do that. Obviously, this is not the right moment, or that is not the right thing to do. So, and you should do that with all your magical stuff.
Right,
it's kind of like, if there's a ton of resistance, and that resistance is obviously not coming from some external thing saying, I shall fight you.
Not like trees breaking against the wall. I'm not trying to say that's what happened. But if it's not something external completely, right, like, no, never more, whatever, then there's that resistance.
Just set it aside.
Yeah.
Or rethink. It's kind of like, and this certainly, it's happened with me more with bind runes than anything else. I'll be, you've got, it just suddenly dawns on me, you've got the wrong runes. You're looking at this from the wrong direction. You know, rethink the outcome. What is the real outcome you're wanting? Because that, in a lot of ways, that's your higher self going, I know you're not listening to me, so I shall continue to kick you in the back of the head. And
The kicking shall continue.
until you give this up, or you think about it, or you look at this again. So always pay attention to that. Now, sometimes I can't say that I've ever been creating bind runes or creating sigils or something like that. I don't know that I've ever had the experience of an external resistance, because until I have it ready, you know, there's not a whole lot of energy in itself. But I have had that, this ain't right, this ain't right, this ain't right, this ain't right. You know, it doesn't look right, can't connect to it. It's technically, you know, it is technically correct, which is not the best kind of correct.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and my problem is that I can generate a lot of energy. So I have to be careful that, you know, I haven't, I already, like, I've had rituals where the magic has already happened and me describing what we're about to do.
Not everybody participating.
It was like, I mean, the people had a cone and everything. They were like, oh, what's happening to us? Oh my God. I'm like, oh shit.
Usually I have to drag people kicking and screaming. No, anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, so I have to be careful with doing things like this, is that I hold back on committing until I'm finished. Like, I have to make sure I stay where I'm at,
right,
so that I'm not like jumping ahead. So by the time, you know, I don't really need, for example, I don't really need this candle to start burning before I actually light it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, for some of us, it's just, you know, sorry. I got mine.
That's not nice.
That's not. So, but yeah. So taking your time and spending some time, really understanding, and there's usually multiple ways to approach something.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's removing barriers, sometimes it's moving away, sometimes it's convincing, sometimes it's finding something else for someone to do. You know, it's all kinds of things.
There's the distracting, there's the, yeah. And one of the things too, I think what you'll find as you practice these things, as you use the various techniques, what you're going to find is you're going to like and be more attracted to some things than you are to others. So, for example, you know, some people will enjoy this combination of Gestalt symbols, you know, putting them together to create things, versus, you know, creating a sigil using the magic squares, or making bind runes, or making alphabetic sigils, or those kinds of things. You'll find yourself, you know, coming to enjoying or being more attracted to one than the other, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to do everything. I tend to use bind runes when I am looking to create something that has more permanency, and I tend to use the magic squares where I have a goal in mind, and I shall do this ritual, or I will give it to you for a mojo bag for this thing and everything, and then when it's done, it's done. But if something is going to be really ongoing,
like if you're scribing it on a tool, or
something like that, I'm more likely to use a bind rune or to use Gestalt symbols than I am to use the sigils. Now, what you're going to find in a lot of ceremonial is that that's exactly, if you've ever seen the ceremonial set, a real OTO, you know, the blade and the chalice and the pentacle and the wand and everything, what you find on there is either the Hebrew letters and sigils, you know, created off of the magic squares.
Just
so
I'm clear, The Gestalt symbols are, oh, there we are. Never mind, found them.
It's those basic kinds of things.
Okay.
Circles and triangles and squares and crosses and
Okay,
lines and and it's the stuff that we recognize all the time. I mean, octagons and they're usually very basic. And yet they contain within them something that speaks to a much more primal part of ourselves. Because human beings are great at pattern matching.
That's our functional, that is our
primary functional, right, pattern matching. We're terrible at mathematics. We're terrible at language. Ask us to memorize, some people are really good savants for, but if I needed to, that was one of the things I had an argument with some people in computer science about AI. And it's kind of like the problem with computers is pattern matching. They're not good at it. They're not designed,
well, that was the whole thing about computer science.
Right.
That when you had the way it affected most of us was in the speed monitors that cops used, right? They would say things like, that car is going 45 miles an hour. But if you pointed at a tree, so that tree is going 70 miles an hour. The reality is that you didn't realize that everything had a speed. Right? It didn't actually have pattern recognition. So if the cop pointed it just a matter a little bit this way, and many of them knew that, they could get almost any speed off that sucker. And so
now,
but now they've gotten better at that triangulation to make sure that they're actually looking at the car they're claiming is doing the speed.
And then facial recognition.
Yeah.
But remember what facial recognition is. When you look at some of the diagrams that are being created and everything, what you're really looking at is a series of lines, taking points within the face and creating those.
That's right.
Right. And then computers are good at that. I have this set of lines, and I will match it to this set of lines to see if they match.
Yeah, so they're basically doing like a form of fingerprinting.
Yeah. Right.
By turning the face into a print.
Right.
But the thing is that humans, however, can see faces everywhere.
Well, and that's the other thing. Human beings, on the other hand, see faces everywhere because that's part of our evolutionary.
Yeah.
So we're getting away from Sigils.
But the thing is that there is a hard limit. What was we were talking about? The symbols, the Gestalt symbols. We have a connection to the Gestalt symbols that predates our us.
Right.
And so it's part of our inheritance. And psychologically, it would be considered part of the collective unconscious,
right.
Our connection to them. And so we have an attraction and understanding of them that goes deeper than actual knowledge.
Right.
And so that's why they work, right? So if you can make your sigils out of Gestalt symbols, you're using like the equivalent of the alphabet of mystery.
Right. Right. You are digging deep into. You're digging deep into not only the collective unconsciousness, but into the parts of your brain, parts of the brain that predate what you would call us.
Mm-hmm.
We're down in the form.
You're down in the bone and the marrow, because
Right.
that's the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
That's our connection to it.
Yeah.
So you're down there.
You're down in the form. And if you draw things out of the form, then, they continue to be connected to that. And they also, I would be interested to see, I never experimented on muggles. Should probably experiment on muggles more.
You know who did? Sheldrake. He went around teaching folks the Hebrew alphabet.
Right.
And see if teaching it in one section would increase its efficacy in another section without them having any crossover. Because you're seeing if the group mind learned it
Right.
and held on to it.
Yeah.
And they had problems because he had people in his group who didn't know that their ancestry was Jewish, was Hebrew. And so what was happening is as he was teaching them the alphabet, some people would just suddenly know what it meant. And he would go, how the hell is that? Because he's picking up people at random. Because he basically says, people who don't have previous knowledge of, and he just lists a whole bunch of things. And it was because they didn't know they had the ancestry, but what was happening in the sessions is they were actually going, gosh, that looks like so-and-so. And he would go, oh, and he would make a little notation, and later they check and and it was funny, but it proves, like he was trying to prove one thing and it proved some other things. Right? That you actually have some memories that are not yours personally. And so that was funny. That was very funny.
But what I would think, what would be interesting is if you did an image like this.
And took it to, I've always thought about taking my symbols up to the Assisi Institute where I went for archetypal pattern analysis and see if they could look at these symbols and know what they meant.
See what they meant, or see if what their response to them would be.
Yeah.
And then take them down to whatever your local pub is and see what their response is. Well,
yeah.
I mean, you probably sat in a bar.
Never. I've never sat.
An actual bar, not a hotel bar or anything like that. But you look at the artwork on the wall.
Yeah.
You look at things, the images that are in there. Some things attract your attention, other things don't.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting thing. It goes back to, what our brains are designed to find those patterns. We can also pick out straight line. I mean, there's a lot of things that are, when you look at those Gestalt symbols, you see, you're basically talking about straight lines and curves. Straight lines, because that's what we're responding to. And that's something that's built into the very primal parts of us.
But that's also, vowels and consonants.
Right.
That's, what is the stopping is consonants is the lines and the vowels are curves.
Or curves.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
So when you're making your sigils.
And you're selling your symbol set on Etsy.
Yeah, don't sell your symbol. But also be mindful of that. I mean, again, I want to make that clear. Just because it's a particular symbol within your own symbol set, just because it's personal and everything, especially when you're doing group work, always be careful of that because it may mean something entirely different to everybody else in the group. And so if it does, when you're doing group work, and this is important, especially when you're using symbols and things like that, when you're doing that group work, everybody needs to be on the same page. Part of the function of the sigil or the symbol that you're using or whatever is to keep everybody and hold everybody in the same place, looking in the same direction and concentrating on the same thing. And if I'm going to use my private and then hope that everybody will get it, or even if I explain it to them, hey, this is part of my private symbol set, well, I should simply accept that because I'm in charge.
Well, it helped that I had a stick.
I always have a stick. But the problem is that human beings are naturally rebellious.
That's right. Big stick.
Pointy stick.
Pointy stick.
Gotta have a pointy stick. But
I'm talking about my sigils.
But again, what will work effectively for you as an individual does not necessarily translate into something that will work for a group. So when you're designing these, again, intention and what outcome, and then the circumstance. Now, sometimes, like for example, the symbol that we used at the last Between the Worlds, when we put the octogram on on the ground,
yeah,
we created those banners, and the banners had very specific. All of those, really and truly, were very common symbols that most people would recognize. The 8-pointed star, the astrological glyphs, and yet there was also the Kabbalistic glyphs that Evo created years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things. I have taught those and shared those with people, and they're effective. The more people use them, I think the more effective they'll be. 200 years from now, they will be the traditional obelisk.
But that's what it is. It's like, yeah, if you use it long enough, we used to joke 3 times in this tradition.
Well, this
Yeah.
glyph, the Tree of Life glyph and everything, was hardly the only one, that arose out of both esoteric Judaism and the Renaissance. There were a bunch of them.
Yeah, I was talking about the ones that were in North Africa that found
Right.
out, the University of Timbuktu, that there were lots of glyphs of basically the Tree of Life.
Right. This one is the one, though, that most people know and almost everyone uses. And it's the one that stuck. Now, for me, it seems to me, or from my perspective, when a symbol like that sticks, and when there's a lot of different possibilities and variations, and one of them sticks, and it's not like there was a whole big program to suppress the other symbols or everything. It's just this is the one that stuck.
Now, see, to me, it's like Betamax and VHS. Betamax was better, but the porn industry standardized on VHS, and so we all had to standardize with VHS. And so
Betamax was better only in the sense that it had a better format, a better video format, but it had its own limitations that VHS did not have. So
I tried to do this earlier. I got it. But the whole point is that by the time you get through it, nobody cares about those technical arguments. Right? What it is that at some point you had to have VHS in order to use
porn.
To use the available movies that we could watch. So pretty much as more and more esoteric practitioners were writing about and using and basing things on that particular glyph, it became almost impossible to find resources for the other glyphs. And so that's far more likely the reason why that one stayed around. And so we have to understand that there's no, like I said, it's not like the Court of Nicene where they all come together and vote one up or down, right? That many times it's just like who writes about it more and who gets the information out there, who shares it. And so we just have to accept that that's how we inherit. And yeah, there are some values associated with that. There are some things that, who had access to the proper resources or the materials or the leadership or the clandestine networks or whatever. So it's not like the ones that was the best stay, the one that actually had legs and could bypass other things are the ones that stayed.
In addition, it's the one that people found useful.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a couple of the ones, I've seen some of the other ones, and I'm like, well, I don't understand how that could possibly be useful.
Because you already had that. If you didn't have that and you had to compare them, you would say it about both of them.
Have you seen the Hidden Paths one?
No.
Because this could be a whole lot more complicated.
Yeah, okay.
But
yeah.
No, I understand. I have a certain, bias about it.
Yeah.
Because this is the one that I first encountered and everything.
And similarly for me, so this is the one I learned, and so this is the one I know.
The one they know. And this is the one that was most written about. And whether it was the best or not, or the most, it was the one that still resonated with what it was trying to. I think that's important too when you're looking at symbols. Does it actually resonate for you when you're looking at it? Does it continue to resonate with what it's supposed to represent? And it has some symbols. Yeah. They either lose their resonance.
They lose their potency over time.
Because there's either they get disconnected from what they're supposed to be representing, Or, in the case of some symbols,
They get
they
misused.
get misused so badly,
Like the swastika.
right, that there's no
Redeeming.
recovering them. And you know what's a problem there, or and this is human beings. It's kind of like, because while we are good at pattern recognition, our ability to discern some differences is bad.
Yeah, nuance is not necessarily.
Yeah. So it's lines and angles, and that's what it is. And so even the variations that were not involved got tainted by that one variation, so that any of those, when you see them, there is this automatic reaction because they follow that symbolic pattern of straight lines and angles. And so, even the people that say, well, we'll use it, there's the clockwise versus the counterclockwise, and there's the angled versus the straight, and it's kind of like, yes, I understand that, but all of them have got a taint to them. Yeah. And someday, perhaps, but I don't.
Yeah, it doesn't matter which direction the swastika going, it's already,
right.
It's tainted, it's gone.
So it was a very potent sun symbol, before that happened and everything, and it is a very sad thing that you can't use it. But I would never use it. I wouldn't use it because, yeah, I recognize, the clockwise versus the counterclockwise and the various variations and all of that kind of stuff, and what came out of Hinduism and what came out of Native American and different things like that and all of that kind of stuff. That's me. Most people, when they look at that, automatically respond in a particular way. And that is not the response that I am looking for when I am creating a signal.
Right.
So be careful of those kinds of things as well. Absolutely nothing wrong with the Celtic cross. The cross with the circle on it. And yet I can't use it myself because for me, it still represents a particular time in my life that I just can't get past. And though, while the symbol itself, the symbol of the unequal armed cross, is far older than Christianity, far older than Christianity, it carries the energy, that particular energy, and therefore not compatible with anything that I am doing. So now that's me, and I would not use it in public, and I don't use it in my private. What other people do in their private or public, is up to them. So,
and there's also, there are time periods that winnow away certain things. So with I'm going to say it wrong. It's after Renaissance. It's the Victorian. That certain things got winnowed away because they didn't. It was out of style. It was out of common, usage or whatever. And so you have to understand that often our inheritance has been pruned for reasons that don't make a lot of sense. Right? And my specialty is in mythology and folk and fairy tale. And I tell the thing that the reason why I study, say, for example, fairy tales in particular, is because they're what's left after everyone has gone through and chopped and pruned and things up. And I believe that whatever is left is like a sigil. It is like something that can be expanded back to see what it actually was.
Right.
And so, my dissertation was on Little Red Riding Hood, and I was able to go into it and expand it back out and show that it was, in fact, what everybody thought it was, a rite of passage, right? And it was about, a place that had to honor wolves because they were, quite frankly, scared to death of them. They represented something in that environment, and that they would never send a child into the woods by themselves in that environment. So there is something else going on in this story. And that's how I was able to unfold and unconcentrate and undilute that larger story within. Well, many times for what we have, there is a larger context that we are missing. And so I encourage people to be willing to have a little like awe, a little like respect, a little humility, and treat these as if they're your mother's fine china, and don't willy-nilly with them. And because there's more to it than what is there in the eye, and some of it's what it's carrying, what it's been carrying, and some of it's that it's some of it you don't know that some parts of it got pruned, and you're left with all that you see. And then the ethereal and the astral, there may be the rest of it still there. So be mindful of that.
Well, and this also encourages you, remember that when you're creating these things, going back to what Katrina had said earlier, it's kind of like this is where you journal this information. You are providing all of the different contexts because now you've gotten down to the condensed, pruned, focused representation. But you have a ton of context that led you to creating that signal. And especially things that you're going to use long term. Because we all have memory gaps. We all forget why we did something. And it becomes important to be able to go back and look at the context of what you were thinking. How about this? It becomes important to the future you to be able to know what now you was thinking at that point. Because future you may decide, okay, I no longer need this. Or I'm going to change the context of this because that context no longer applies. Or this is perfect and I shall continue with this as is. You're leaving a trace for yourself. Because eventually, and then, 200 years from now or 500 years from now, when they, uncover your home, and they find all your sigils and all of that kind of stuff, and they'll wonder, since they'll know that it was for ritual purposes, ceremonial purposes, you will have provided them the context so they don't make the Motel the Mysteries mistake.
With my toilet seat.
Yeah.
Hypnotized for your prediction.
Well, and she wore the earrings that were actually the scrub brushes.
Yes.
Or no, toothbrushes. They were
Toothbrushes,
toothbrush earrings. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely fantastic. And terrifying at the same time. Because human beings are we're so bad.
I know.
Well, when I teach the classes on Egyptology, when I do my classes on a variety of Egypt topics, I always talk about Egyptologists. It's kind of like they're absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Well,
not that I'm not as well. And Michael can speak for himself.
I always remind myself, there's always that voice in the back of my head that says you're absolutely crazy. And I'm afraid if it ever stops. I know. I've really gone over the.
If I start saying no, I am perfectly sane.
Yeah.
You know that's the problem.
My boots aren't high enough for that kind of
thing. I know. Neither am I.
The other thing too, I want to talk just a little bit about materials.
Okay.
Because we talked about printing them in paper and stuff of that nature and all that kind of stuff. Again, it goes back to what's your intention and what's your outcome. What's your intended outcome for this? So obviously, if it's something, let's say that you're creating a protective sigil to put on your car, then probably a piece of paper is, not going to work. You're going to want something more permanent, something that has more of the creative energy, the pattern of creation attached to it versus I drew this on a piece of paper. Again, if it's a temporary thing for a mojo bag, or I'm doing this for one particular ritual, fine. If I'm creating something more permanent, like I know that almost all the covens have painted their sigils onto banners, and keep them in their ritual rooms and things of that nature because they use them all the time. Even if they don't use them in a particular ritual, that sigil, that is the representation of the energy of the coven, is there.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it needs to be more permanent. If you get into working with the planetary seals, you know, and using them as part of your regular magic, then you may want to think about, you know, getting the various metals and materials to make them. Even if you don't, one of the things that I had suggested was to somebody, it's kind of like they wanted to do them in wood. They're like, well, that's great. So what you want to do is you want to stain that wood. You're going to carve them into wood. You want to stain that wood toward the color that it should be. I said, depending on the wood, you might get a good color, you might not. So be careful what wood you're using. He said, but you know, you don't want to use quicksilver, and you don't want to buy that much gold and all that kind of stuff. There's gold and silver leaf. So then there's not tin leaf or lead leaf or anything like that. One of the things I had suggested is drill a hole. So you drill a hole in the side of your sigil, the wooden sigil and everything.
For your element.
You put the elements with the metal inside that hole and you seal it up. And then you stain over it. So it's in there. And you can get away, if you're extra careful, you can get away with quicksilver that way. Although I've been trying to find, because Evo had found one time, and I think that they had only made like a handful of these sets.
Oh, the sets of the different.
The 7, yeah, they're sealed in glass, so you can have so he's got quicksilver, you know, sealed in glass. So he's got the 7 metals,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to use in ritual.
Right.
So again, you know, if you're going to make a protective sigil that you're going to put in the window or on the door or, you know, something like that, then yeah, you're going to want to do something more permanent. You don't have to get into, you know, now, if you are a Renaissance alchemist, then you would definitely have to, you know, have all the necessary metals, and you need to put the planetary sigils, and then you'd have to have the name of the intelligence and Hebrew all around the edges and all that kind of stuff. Feel free.
Obviously, you have a lot too much time on your hands.
Too much time and too much money.
Money, yeah.
I turned it into artwork. I turned it into artwork.
The artwork.
Yeah, so I created a sigil, and it's a personal sigil, so no one who looks at this would know what it means. I'm the only one that knows the meaning. I've kept it secret and purposefully, and then I put it on watercolor paper, and then I watercolored it. I colored it and created a piece of art out of it.
It was just hanging around, and
hangs in my room.
No one knows.
No one knows.
Right.
Until it manifests, it stays there. Still working. Still working. We're closer. We're much closer.
So, again, this. You know, so here's the glyph. You know, and she put this is put together, and or this, she painted. You know, painted the sigils, engraved the sigil. I mean, I've got things engraved into wood, things of that nature. So think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But like I said, exactly, if you want to embroider them, actually I have a robe. I very rarely wear it anymore, primarily because it's a really nice robe, but it's lined in linen. So it is incredibly hot. So I can wear it at Yule, and that's about it.
Why not at summer solstice?
Talk about not breathing. But it has the runes embroidered in it. You know, and one of Jim's covenanters one time, she had a white robe, and she embroidered the planetary sigils on one arm and the sigil for the signs, the signs on the other sleeve. So, now, tattoos.
Oh, God.
Just always be careful if you're going to have a sigil tattooed on your person.
Yes. I know this one.
But you know what it is you're getting into.
Did you intend that to be a fire?
Among other things.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, this is one of those things, right? It's like very overdetermined. There's a
Yeah.
lot of different contexts and meanings, and I decided to bring several of them into it.
Okay.
So in that particular case, I mean, I think having something like that, I mean, the Celtic knotwork on my arm, you know, it's in the planetary colors and has the, you know, it has a symbolism to it in the colors and things of that nature. And so I knew exactly what I was doing when I had it tattooed on my person. The winged sun disk, the Raharakti on my back. You know, I knew what I was getting into when I had that tattooed on my back. So some people put things on their person without really thinking about it. I'm always terrified when people have a vault nut on their person somewhere and they're not, you know, the intertwined triangles.
Yeah.
That basically is Odin's symbol for insert spear here.
Oh.
You know, I have dedicated myself to Odin and Ragnarok, you know, and so when I die, right on to Valhalla and right to Ragnarok. Here we go. You know, and I know a couple of people that have done that on purpose because they have dedicated themselves to him. And they knew what they were doing when they had it tattooed over their heart. And then I've also seen it on other people, and it's kind of like, do you know what that means? And they're like, no, but it's cool, isn't it? And it's kind of like, yeah, you'll find out.
No, well, she also has a phoenix on her back, so.
Well, no, it's absolutely glorious.
Yes. But I have seen that too, but it's like tattoos are, because we both know a person who's had to get tattoos removed.
Correct. Who's gone through the long and painful process of having a tattoo, you know, having a particular sigil tattooed on their person, and then going through the long and painful process of having it removed because that sigil was no longer valid and was actually causing them tons of problems.
Yeah. So, you know, just
be really careful.
It's a permanent, that it is a permanent mark that will walk with you for the rest of your life.
Well, you can
have it removed.
Unless you have it removed or you have it replaced. Like you can change what those things are.
Yeah.
By putting another tattoo on top
of it. So tattooing over cover up. Yeah. It's a good way to
But yeah.
When those tattoos are no longer valid.
Yeah.
That's why it's, you know, the 1 inch tattoo was a few months of consideration. And
yeah.
The full back tattoo was several years.
Years of consideration. There you go.
I know the next tattoos I want, you know, I have been pondering them for, I don't know, a while.
Well, you know, I can get the Sharpie tattoos.
You know, Evo said brands would work really well.
I told him no. I keloid. If I'm going to keloid from ink going on, I am definitely going to keloid from a brand.
That's what you're supposed to do for brands.
Yeah, it's like I don't want more keloids. Thank you. They are painful. That's why I walk around zombie nipples because I have keloids on my nipples. Yeah. If you see me right on my Facebook feed screaming nipples, breast reduction.
Again, not really involved with sales.
But the inference is that, you know, once you have something, that it has an impact.
It has an impact on you.
Yeah.
You just have.
It's just like naming your dog, you know, Kali or
Loki.
It's like.
Or Daffy.
Yeah. H. Debbie is a Hindu god. And Debbie is a Hindu god.
Durga, Mom.
Yeah, no. Might as well call him Kali, for that matter. But the whole idea is to be mindful of what it really represents and use some common sense. And yeah, you're going to be around people who have not done their research or understood what they were doing. And you know, just like for everything else you see where you wish them well or not, as the case may be. But,
people makes their choices.
Yeah.
I think the big thing when you're designing, and you know, it's one thing when you're doing these things for yourself. It's something else when you're doing it you're doing a public ritual or you're doing it within a group and everything, one of the things to be mindful of is the idea is to keep everybody on the same page. You know, are you and let me add this particular piece. In creating sigils, especially for ritual work and stuff like that, is it adding to the ritual? I mean, is it really adding anything to the ritual?
Or is it a distraction?
Or again, it goes back to, or is it just because y'all learned about sigils today and magic squares and everything, I shall use this on every ritual.
So your homework tonight is to produce your list of crystals using magic squares.
That's right. So just because.
Just because.
So
Yeah.
going on, and Winfaya, do you all have anything else? Any questions? Does anybody here have any questions?
For the other questions, may I have to turn the fan off for a second?
Yeah, no, this has been lovely. It was actually easier to hear after the break. I'm not sure why, but I turned my video off. Maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, but did you have any questions or anything?
One just to add to the prior conversation about the meanings that people impose on our cultural context. It just reminded me of a conversation had with Evo, I don't know, must have been 20 years ago, about Kabbalah. We were talking about the roots of Kabbalah in Jewish mysticism, of course, and whether as people who were not a part of that cultural tradition, what right we have to work with the symbol set and the egregores and the energy body and so forth. And my memory of that conversation, which I took out of it, and please feel free to, if I don't want to represent Evo's position on this now, this goes back to a conversation decades ago, but it clicked for me, so I wanted to toss it in there, which was that what we work with as Western magical practitioners has its lineage in and roots from the Jewish mystic tradition, and we owe obligation of gratitude to that. But what we work with, if we are not a part of that tradition, is the Western magical tradition that evolved from that. So we can't say, someone who is a Western magician cannot say that they are a part of the Jewish mystical tradition. They can't claim that falsely and appropriate that. At the same time, working with the symbol set and the energies inherent in that as a part of Western magic, you can work with that. And so when you were talking about the various interpretations of symbols, I was just reminded of that there are so many layers of meaning, historical, cultural, and magical and energetic. So I just had wanted to put that out there because that differentiation for me made a lot of difference at the time.
Yeah, and the important part of that, and that is still our position. I mean, it's still my position. It's like we have our roots in that, but we're not Jewish mystics. We do not study the Kabbalah the way they study it, or use it in the patterns that they use it. What arose from their connection to the Renaissance and to practitioners of those periods of time, and then grew into the Hermetic tradition, Hermetic Kabbalah, is actually different in its root. Well, not in its roots, but it's different in its expression. And therefore, we acknowledge the roots, just like we acknowledge the roots of a lot of things.
Just like our numbering system is, Arabic, and which is one of those funny things. Should we use Arabic numbers?
Oh, no, we should not. We shouldn't do anything. It's kind of like, well, prepare for Roman numerals. So hope you remember what L and M mean.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what C is,
yeah.
but
yeah, the same kind of thing. Yeah.
And again, I think the important part is that we don't claim things that are not ours to claim.
Right.
The magic squares, that particular set of patterns, you know, that particular solution to the magic squares is the traditional solution that arises out of Hermetic Kabbalism. Like I said, it's not the only solution, but it is the one that everybody has been using. I didn't create that. I can't say that, oh, that's my solution. No, that solution was around long before I came along and long after I'm gone. So I think that it's important to acknowledge the roots of things at the same time, you know, doing our stuff.
And that's why here in the school, I always try to give the lineage of any of the teachings I have. If it comes from somewhere else or it comes from someone else, I name it. If it comes from a certain tradition, I try to name that tradition. But it's really important, just like I made the statement earlier about how, you know, I would read, I don't know if you were here for that, but I would read poems at a church service, and someone would walk up and ask for a copy, and I'd hand them a copy, and then later I'd see it online and attribute it to Anonymous. And they literally got it from my hand. And
you are anonymous.
That's why I said, that's why we say anonymous is a woman. And there is something about being able to name when you something that you created and owning it. And so what I tell my students, that anything I don't attribute is mine.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you get out there and you start saying, oh, I learned this, and you don't attribute a lineage, then you're going against what I taught, which I give a lineage for everything that's not mine.
Evo and I have both had the circumstances where we have been at conferences and gone to classes and seen our handouts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
With your names on them?
No, they usually take our names off of them, but it's kind of like, I remember this handout, you know.
I called Evo when I first started teaching Kabbalah and asked him explicitly, can I use your handouts? And he's for Kabbalah, and he said yes. And I said, and I will always have your name. And every time I teach Kabbalah, I hand out, these are from Evo. Because they're really good handouts.
I know.
Yeah.
So while I'm thinking about it, maybe use these
Oh, yeah.
as we attribute.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then, you know, and
send royalty checks. And, you know.
Well, what's funny about a lot of these handouts, and actually, Evo and I have plenty of cross-pollination of the handouts.
I was getting ready to say, you guys been working together so long.
You know, that, you know, sometimes, when it's very specific that I have taken Evo's handout, it will be on the bottom of that. It's kind of like, this is Evo's handout,
yeah,
unaltered by me or unadded to or anything like that. Now, if I'm using the glyph,
yeah,
the glyph is the glyph.
The glyph is the glyph.
Or if I'm creating my own sigils or things of that nature, I think, well, just always be mindful of where you got things, where they came from.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that always bothers me sometimes about some of the stuff that I have heard and been taught, you know, and been in classes and stuff. Not that, you know, they stole them necessarily, but I remember being in one class and being taught this particular chant, and it's kind of like, so what do these words mean? Because it wasn't English, French or Spanish or anything that I recognized, and they said, well, you know, it's
traditional.
No, it was one of those, you know, channeled things, and it's like, in this language is some, and it's kind of like, so what do the words mean? It's like, well, we're not really sure, and it's like, well, I guess I won't be using this.
I tell the story that of reclaiming and how many chants out there came from reclaiming. And I know like most of the people who created these chants and have been in the room when they sung it. And I've gone places and heard people get up and sing it totally wrong and claim, you know, attributions for it that have no basis in reality. And I'm sitting there going, and that's why when I teach the thing on appropriation, I ask the question, is it possible to appropriate from other neo-pagan traditions?
The answer is
yes. And I use the reclaim because Ann Hill is, besides Starhawk and Thorn, are a huge source of some of the chants. And she tells a story of going to a place where they're singing her chant. and she's cool, you know. She's like, yeah, well, that's good, I guess. But the thing is that was really good. They were singing it wrong. And she just let it go. And I say, yeah, I don't interrupt. But if they're starting to teach it, I will say, well, actually, this is how it goes. Because it gets changed into a dirge wherever it goes. But yeah. Yeah.
Because there's only one tone for chant. There's only one.
But it's like, what is it? Tone
minor,
C,
A minor, D minor, A minor. It's the only that.
That's the only. And then it's like no matter how much you clap, it's still Oh God! I'm sorry. In my culture, we all hear drum beats, and I know that I'm making a general statement, but I will stand by that. How can you not hear a drum beat? I don't know.
So anything?
Your turn, dear.
No, I just had a visual with that of like seeing people get frustrated and their heads are nodding even harder and they're clapping even harder and nothing changes. It's happened a few times.
We've been there before.
Yes.
Yep.
People.
I remember it wasn't so bad. Jim's Coven at one time had nobody that knew how to chant. I mean, nobody. And so Jim was gone on a work trip, and I was in my office, and they were downstairs. It was for Bridget, and so they were doing Holy Well and Sacred Flame.
Oh, good Lord.
And so they're tone deaf. Several of them are tone deaf, and they start this, and then they stop, and they start again, and then they stop. And finally, I just couldn't take another second. Come downstairs. It's kind of like, let me suggest you do it. He said, can't. Just say the words. You know, instead of trying to sing. Because I tried to teach it. It's kind of like, this is how it goes. Follow. It's kind of like, yeah, just can't it. Can't sing it.
Say can't or don't, okay? Just can't or don't.
You're getting me. The gods are going to be really, really angry.
I'm too Bridget now. Are they calling me or not? Somebody give me some receipt. Yeah. No, it's very funny, but yeah. No, and I'm going to ask you a few questions so you can come upstairs. But I think we're done. Okay. Which means that, all right, you're out early. I don't want you out there hanging out at the street corners and causing trouble. Eva, you know how you are.
Hey, can I ask real quick, what do you use on the computer to make the magic squares?
Right now, I'm using a program called Affinity because I've decided that Adobe is evil.
Yes, I'm having so many problems with all my Adobe.
Well, it was when they got away from, having an actual license.
Yes.
To, you buy a subscription forever, and it's
Yeah.
like, forget this.
That's like Microsoft and their subscriptions. Yeah.
And if you have a Mac, you can use
That's what I use.
the preview.
You can use preview to do it, and you can use something like.
We're using basic shapes, so and all the basic shapes are there in preview.
If you're doing something like on the magic squares, what I do is Affinity is.
You can put it on a different layer, and then you can draw over.
You put that in the back layer, and then you can draw your lines and stuff like that.
I was thinking I would put open the PDF, or not the PDF, but the JPEG, and then draw the lines on it, and then
get rid of the JPEG.
get rid of the JPEG.
Yeah, you can do that.
That's
what I use. Is Affinity.
So discussions of software apps can go on the Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
I love you all, and I'm going
Bye.
to the meeting, and the recording will be up in a day or two, depending on how well I recover from tomorrow.
And we didn't talk about the orgy.
Oh. The orgy will commence here as soon as I stop the recording. Love you
Have
all.
fun.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.